The first thing Olivia Bennett noticed was that someone else's mistake was about to become her problem. She stood near the entrance of the Grand Crescent Hotel ballroom with a clipboard tucked beneath one arm, quietly reviewing the evening's schedule for the fifth time. Crystal chandeliers reflected across polished marble floors, while servers hurried between tables making final adjustments. Every centerpiece was perfectly aligned. Every guest name card had been double-checked. That was how Olivia liked things. Order. Because when everything around her stayed organized, it was easier to ignore how chaotic the rest of her life had become. Her small event planning company had survived exactly 18 difficult months. Survived was probably too generous a word. It had limped from one modest contract to the next, while larger firm won the glamorous weddings, celebrity launches, and corporate galas. This charity fundraiser was the biggest event Olivia had managed all year. Not because she had organized it, because her company had been hired as a subcontractor after another planner backed out. She wasn't complaining. Work was work. Rent was due in 11 days. Her assistant had already accepted another job because Olivia couldn't promise steady paychecks anymore. Failure had begun arriving in small, quiet pieces rather than dramatic disasters. That somehow hurt more. Olivia checked her watch. 6:38. Guests would begin arriving in less than 20 minutes. A voice crackled through her radio. Olivia, floral display near Ballroom B is leaning. I'm on my way. She took 3 steps before another voice called behind her. Miss Bennett. She turned. Standing near the entrance was a sharply dressed man in an expensive navy suit. Early 30s. Perfect posture. Professional smile. He looked less like hotel staff and more like someone who managed billion-dollar negotiations before breakfast. There you are, he said with visible relief. Mr. Sterling has been waiting. Olivia blinked. I'm sorry. This way, please. I think you've confused me with someone else. The man frowned. You are Miss Olivia. Yes. He smiled again. Wonderful. Before she could explain further, he gestured toward a private elevator. Mr. Sterling requested complete privacy before the gala. Olivia hesitated. I'm actually working the event. So is he. That answer somehow made even less sense. She followed anyway. Mostly because she wanted to straighten out the misunderstanding before whoever they were actually expecting became angry. The private elevator climbed in complete silence. When the doors opened, Olivia stepped into an elegant penthouse suite overlooking the city skyline. Floor-to-ceiling windows. Modern artwork. Fresh white orchids. The suite probably cost more for one night than she paid in rent all month. A tall man stood near the windows with his back turned. Dark-tailored tuxedo. Broad shoulders. One hand resting in his pocket. The assistant cleared his throat. Mr. Sterling. The man turned. Steel blue eyes settled on Olivia. For several seconds, nobody spoke. Then Ethan Sterling sighed. No. The assistant looked confused. Sir, this isn't her. Olivia folded her arms. That's what I've been trying to say. The assistant's face lost all color. I apologize. He disappeared so quickly it almost looked rehearsed. Silence returned. Ethan rubbed his forehead. This evening isn't going particularly well. You could say that. He walked toward her. Everything about him suggested confidence. Except his eyes. Those looked exhausted. I'm Ethan Sterling. I know who you are. Most people did. His technology and real estate empire appeared in business magazines almost weekly. At 35, he had become one of the country's youngest billionaires. Olivia had expected someone arrogant. Instead, he looked like a man who hadn't slept much in weeks. I owe you an apology. You don't owe me anything. I do. My assistant wasted your time. Olivia smiled politely. Apology accepted. She turned toward the door. I should get back downstairs. Please wait. Something in his voice stopped her. Not authority. Desperation. I realize this sounds strange, Ethan said carefully, but I may need your help. Olivia laughed. I organize seating charts. So I've learned. I'm probably not qualified for billionaire problems. You might be the only person qualified. She raised an eyebrow. I'm listening. Ethan walked toward the windows overlooking the city. You've heard of Lang Global. Of course. Their chairman is attending tonight. Olivia nodded. So are several international investors. And every one of them believes I'll be announcing my engagement tonight. She stared. I'm sorry, what? My fiancée was supposed to arrive 30 minutes ago. Oh, she called. Olivia waited. She ended the relationship today, 9 minutes ago. Olivia couldn't help it. He smiled weakly. Catastrophic. I was going to say unfortunate. Catastrophic is more accurate. He looked surprisingly calm for someone describing the collapse of his engagement. I would simply tell everyone the truth. Olivia offered. I wish I could. Why can't you? Because tomorrow morning we're finalizing a merger worth several $billion. Olivia blinked. The investors believe stability in my personal life reflects stability in my leadership. That seems unfair. It is. So explain. I've spent 6 months assuring everyone the engagement was moving forward. He paused. If the announcement collapses tonight, several people will assume the merger is collapsing too. Olivia slowly realized the impossible position he was in. This affects your company. It affects 32,000 employees. That number settled heavily between them. Neither spoke for several seconds. Then Ethan looked directly at her. I know how absurd this sounds. I have a feeling I'm not going to like your next sentence. I need someone to pretend. Olivia actually laughed. No. I'll compensate you. No. Very generously. No. One evening. She shook her head. You've completely lost your mind. Possibly. I'm an event planner. You also appear calm under pressure. I'm currently panicking. It doesn't show. Olivia paced slowly across the room. This is insane. I agree. I don't know anything about pretending to be someone's fiancée. I don't either. You realize people will ask questions. Yes. They'll take photographs. Yes. They'll publish them. Almost certainly. She stared at him. You're serious. I wouldn't ask if there were another option. Olivia looked toward the city lights. She should leave. Immediately. Nothing about this made sense. Nothing about it sounded safe. Yet Ethan wasn't acting like a manipulative businessman. He looked trapped. Like someone watching years of work collapse in slow motion. What exactly would I have to do? His shoulders relaxed slightly. Arrive with me. He continued carefully. Smile. Talk. Allow people to believe we're engaged. For how long? Tonight. Nothing more. I hope not. Olivia crossed her arms again. And afterward, we'll both go back to our normal lives. She studied him. You'd really pay someone for this? Yes. How much? He named a number. Olivia thought she'd misheard. I'm sorry. He repeated it. It was more money than her company had earned in nearly 4 months. She immediately hated herself for considering it, he noticed. You needn't answer immediately. I already know this is a terrible idea. So do I. But. She looked down at her hands. There were bills waiting at home. Outstanding invoices, equipment payments. Her landlord had been patient. Patience didn't last forever. I have one condition. Name it. If this becomes dishonest beyond simply appearing together to do, it won't. If anyone asks direct questions about marriage plans, I'll answer. If I feel uncomfortable, you leave. No arguments. No arguments. Olivia took a long breath. I can't believe I'm doing this. Neither can I. She extended her hand. One evening. Ethan shook it. One evening. A stylist entered moments later carrying garment bags. Mr. Sterling. He looked over. We're running out of time. Olivia looked at Ethan. I don't even have an evening dress. He smiled for what seemed like the first genuine time all night. I think we can solve that. 40 minutes later, Olivia barely recognized the woman staring back from the mirror. Her elegant navy gown fit perfectly. Her hair had been softly styled. Simple jewelry completed the look without feeling excessive. She still looked like herself, just brighter. Someone knocked. Ethan waited outside. When Olivia stepped into the hallway, he stopped speaking. For one awkward second, he simply looked at her. You look... He searched for the right word. Incredible. Olivia smiled nervously. I clean up reasonably well. You do? His honesty made her unexpectedly self-conscious. You don't look bad yourself. He laughed quietly. I'll take that. The ballroom doors opened. Music drifted through the hotel. Hundreds of guests filled the magnificent hall. Camera flashes erupted almost immediately. There he is. Mr. Sterling. This way. Congratulations. Olivia instinctively stepped backward. Ethan quietly offered his arm. No pressure. She looked at him. You still have time to run. So do you. For one brief second, they both considered it. Then Olivia slipped her arm through his. Together they walked into the ballroom. Every conversation stopped. Every camera turned toward them. The room exploded with applause. Olivia's heartbeat thundered in her ears. One evening. That was all this was supposed to be. Neither of them realized that the first lie had already become far too convincing. 2. If you're enjoying this story so far, take a moment to like the video and subscribe to the channel. It really helps us bring you more heartfelt stories filled with unexpected twists, unforgettable characters, and romances worth believing in. The impossible performance had just begun. The applause lasted much longer than Olivia expected. It rolled through the ballroom like a wave, growing louder as more guests realized who had just entered. Camera flashes lit up every corner of the room, while reporters crowded against the velvet ropes, shouting questions faster than anyone could answer them. Mr. Sterling, when did you propose? Miss, can we get your name? When's the wedding? Olivia instinctively tightened her grip on Ethan's arm. He leaned toward her without changing his smile. Just keep walking. I'd prefer running. I know. Somehow, despite the chaos around them, Ethan sounded almost amused. It helped. A little. They slowly made their way across the ballroom toward the head table, where members of Sterling Holdings' executive board were already standing to greet them. Several executives applauded. Others exchanged relieved glances. One elderly gentleman whispered to another, loud enough for Olivia to hear. So the rumors were true. Looks like it. The market will love this. Olivia kept smiling. Inside, her stomach twisted tighter with every step. She had agreed to pretend for one evening. She hadn't realized the performance would begin the moment they walked through the doors. A distinguished woman approached first. Elegant silver hair. Pearl necklace. Kind eyes. She looked to be in her early 70s. Her face lit up the instant she saw Ethan. There you are. Instead of embracing her grandson immediately, she turned to Olivia. So you're the young woman who's finally convinced him to smile. Olivia blinked. Before she could respond, the woman gently took both of her hands. My dear. Her voice carried genuine warmth. I've been waiting a very long time to meet you. Ethan cleared his throat. Grandmother. So this is Olivia. He nodded. It is. The older woman's eyes sparkled. I'm Eleanor Sterling. It's wonderful to meet you. No, dear. Eleanor smiled. It's wonderful to finally meet you. Olivia's heart sank. This wasn't some distant investor. This was Ethan's grandmother, and she looked genuinely happy. The guilt arrived instantly. She hated lying to kind people, especially people who clearly loved their family. Eleanor reached up and gently adjusted a loose strand of Olivia's hair. You calm him. Olivia glanced toward Ethan. He usually looks much more serious. Eleanor laughed. Exactly. Ethan sighed. I've been standing here for less than a minute, and you're already embarrassing me. Someone has to. The conversation felt so natural that Olivia almost forgot none of it was real, almost. An announcer's voice echoed across the ballroom. Ladies and gentlemen. The room gradually became quiet. Please welcome Mr. Ethan Sterling. More applause followed. Ethan looked toward the stage. I should probably make a speech. He looked back at Olivia. You don't have to come. Before she answered, Eleanor gently squeezed her hand. Oh, nonsense. She smiled warmly. You belong beside him. The words hit Olivia much harder than they should have, because for one brief moment, she wished they were true. Ethan stepped behind the podium, while Olivia remained beside the stage. Hundreds of guests watched attentively. So many familiar faces. His voice carried effortlessly through the ballroom. Thank you all for supporting tonight's children's education fundraiser. Olivia smiled to herself. Despite everything happening, Ethan never forgot why everyone had gathered. He spent several minutes speaking about scholarships, community programs, and expanding educational opportunities. Only then did he pause. I know many of you have been expecting another announcement tonight. Laughter spread through the audience. Someone shouted, We've been waiting. Ethan smiled. I suppose rumors travel faster than quarterly reports. The room laughed again. He looked toward Olivia. Every eye followed. For one terrifying second, she forgot how to breathe. Then Ethan extended his hand. Without thinking, she walked toward him. He gently took her hand. I'd like you all to meet Olivia Bennett. More applause. Camera flashes. Endless flashes. I've been fortunate to build successful companies. He looked at Olivia. But some achievements matter more than business. Olivia looked back at him. His expression wasn't rehearsed anymore. It looked real. Tonight, Ethan continued. I'm grateful that she agreed to stand beside me. He never actually said the words. He didn't announce an engagement. He simply allowed everyone else to reach the conclusion themselves. It was surprisingly clever. The audience erupted anyway. Olivia leaned closer. You didn't technically lie. I try not to. For the next 2 hours, Olivia discovered that pretending to be engaged required far more work than she had imagined. She shook hundreds of hands, accepted endless congratulations, posed for photographs, answered harmless questions with carefully chosen smiles. Every few minutes, Ethan quietly rescued her whenever conversations became too personal. How did you meet? Through mutual friends. When's the wedding? We're enjoying the present? Where will you live? We haven't decided. Always truthful, never complete. She began appreciating how carefully Ethan chose every sentence. He wasn't simply protecting himself. He was protecting her too. Near the dessert tables, Olivia finally escaped for a few minutes. She picked up a glass of sparkling water and exhaled. My feet officially hate me. A familiar voice answered behind her. I was wondering how long you'd last. She turned. Ethan looked considerably more relaxed than he had earlier. You seem calmer. I think we're surviving. You call this surviving? He laughed. I've attended worse galas. She looked around the enormous ballroom. You billionaires have unusual definitions of stress. Would do. For a moment, they simply watched guests enjoying the evening. Children laughed near one of the charity auction displays. Volunteers collected donations. The orchestra played softly in the background. This part, Ethan said quietly. This is why I host these events. The charity. He nodded. My parents believed success only mattered if other people benefited from it. Olivia studied him. I think they'd be proud. His smile faded slightly. I hope so. There was sadness hidden inside those 3 words. Before Olivia could ask more, another executive approached. Mr. Sterling. Ethan turned. The Tokyo investors would like a private conversation. I'll be there shortly. The executive nodded before walking away. Ethan looked back at Olivia. I'll only be gone a few minutes. I'll survive. You've already done far more than I asked. Olivia smiled. I'm starting to realize that. But 15 minutes later, she stood near one of the ballroom balconies overlooking the city. Finally, silence, or at least something close to it. The cool evening air felt refreshing after hours beneath bright lights. She closed her eyes. You look like you're thinking. Olivia opened them. Eleanor had quietly joined her. I was just catching my breath. A wise decision. The older woman leaned gently against the railing. You know, she smiled. Ethan hasn't looked this peaceful in years. Olivia swallowed. I'm sure that's temporary. I don't think so. She looked toward the ballroom. People see a billionaire. She paused. I see my grandson. Olivia listened quietly. He works too much. He trusts too little. He believes solving everyone's problems is somehow his responsibility. Eleanor smiled softly. Tonight was different. Olivia couldn't bear hearing it. Because Eleanor believed every word, and Olivia knew the foundation beneath it was false. I should tell you. She began, then stopped. Tell her what? That everything was a lie. That the grandson she clearly adored had paid a stranger to stand beside him. Before she could continue, Ethan returned. There you both are. Eleanor smiled knowingly. I'll leave you two alone. As she walked away, she whispered to Ethan, don't let this one get away. Olivia looked down at the floor. The guilt felt heavier now. By the time the final guests departed, it was almost midnight. Hotel staff began clearing tables. Musicians packed away instruments. The ballroom finally grew quiet. Olivia slipped off her heels for a moment. I may never wear shoes again. Ethan laughed. I owe you much more than dinner. You already paid me. I wasn't talking about money. She looked at him curiously. You saved tonight. I helped. You did far more than help. He hesitated. My board was ready to panic. They aren't now? They're celebrating. Olivia smiled. Good. A young assistant hurried across the ballroom carrying a tablet. His expression immediately worried Ethan. What happened? The assistant handed him the screen. You should probably see this. Ethan's smile disappeared. Olivia stepped closer. The headline filled the screen. Billionaire steer IDCCRE telelt YENGED MEBI DNDXP TED TAC. Below it were dozens of photographs. There were already thousands of comments. Millions of views. News channels had begun replaying footage from the gala. Social media was exploding. Every major financial publication had picked up the story. Olivia felt her stomach drop. That happened fast. It gets worse. The assistant opened another article. Another. INV stars PIEs persona mailers melastone another. Asme RGR Key D Giros AFTERE and GMEAPARNTACEPA. Olivia looked at Ethan. They really believe this. They do. Silence settled between them. Neither liked where their thoughts were going. Finally, Ethan spoke. The merger meeting is Monday morning. Olivia nodded slowly. 3 days. My board will expect you there. She stared at him. No. I know. This was one evening. I remember. She folded her arms. We had an agreement. We did. He looked genuinely uncomfortable. I'm asking. He stopped himself. No. He started again. I'm hoping. She waited. 1 more week. Olivia closed her eyes. You've got to be kidding. I wish I were. If I disappear tomorrow, the stock falls. The merger collapses. The media starts investigating. He sighed. And 32,000 employees become part of a very different story. Olivia looked toward the now empty ballroom. Just an hour earlier, this had all seemed temporary. Now it had become something much larger, much more complicated. She turned back to Ethan. You said 1 evening. I know. And now you're asking for 1 week. Yes. What happens after that? The truth. You promise. I give you my word. Olivia searched his face. She had met countless wealthy clients over the years. Many treated promises like suggestions. Ethan didn't. That much she already believed. Still, this wasn't her world. This wasn't her life. 1 week could change everything. She took a long, slow breath. I'll think about it. It wasn't yes. It wasn't no. But as they walked out of the silent ballroom together, both of them knew something neither wanted to admit. Walking away had just become much harder than pretending ever was. Olivia barely slept. Every time she closed her eyes, camera flashes exploded behind her eyelids. She woke before sunrise in her small apartment, surrounded by unopened mail, unpaid invoices, and the familiar silence that usually greeted her every morning. Only this morning wasn't familiar. Her phone vibrated, again and again. By 7 o'clock, she had more than 60 missed calls. Friends, former clients, an aunt she hadn't spoken to in 2 years. 3 local reporters. Several unknown numbers. One message simply read Olivia dropped her phone onto the kitchen counter. I need coffee. She brewed a cup, sat beside the window, and opened the news. Big mistake. Every business website carried photographs from the gala. Entertainment blogs were already analyzing her dress. Fashion magazines wanted to identify the designer. Financial analysts discussed what the engagement meant for Sterling Holdings. Nobody knew who Olivia Bennett actually was. That somehow made it stranger. They had created an entirely different version of her overnight, one that didn't exist. Her phone rang again. This time it was Ethan. She answered after a long sigh. I suppose you're calling about the same thing everyone else is. I am. Good morning to you too. I wish it were. Olivia smiled despite herself. You sound exhausted. I've been in meetings since 5. That's unhealthy. I've been informed. She heard papers shuffling, muted voices. Someone closed a door. Finally, the room became quiet. I wanted to apologize. For what? For asking you to think about extending this. You haven't actually asked yet. No. He paused. I'm asking now. Olivia leaned back in her chair. I haven't decided. I understand. I spent half the night wondering if I'd completely lost my mind. What conclusion did you reach? I'm still gathering evidence. Ethan laughed quietly. I deserve that. She looked around her apartment, the cracked paint, the tiny dining table that doubled as her office, the stack of invoices waiting beside her laptop. If I did agree, she spoke carefully. What exactly happens? You'd stay at the Sterling estate. What? Only temporarily. That's not temporary. It makes the story believable. Olivia rubbed her temples. I have work. So do I. My clients need me. I've already spoken with your largest client. She sat upright. You what? I didn't interfere. You definitely interfered. I simply arranged for another planner to assist this week. You can't solve my life with money. I wasn't trying to. His voice softened. I was trying to give you room to choose. That caught her off guard. You investigated my company. I wanted to know who I was asking for help. Ain't. You've never missed a deadline. Olivia blinked. You've received excellent reviews. Your clients consistently describe you as honest. She looked out the window. Now they'll describe me as engaged. There was silence. Then Ethan spoke quietly. I don't want this to hurt you. I know. And if you say no, I'll figure something out. She believed him. That somehow made saying no more difficult. When do you need my answer? When do driver can pick you up at 9? She looked at the clock. It read 8:12. You don't leave much time. The board doesn't either. Olivia laughed. You billionaires really do schedule everything. We'll try. I'll be downstairs. At exactly 9 o'clock, a black luxury sedan stopped outside her apartment building. Her elderly neighbor nearly dropped his newspaper. Olivia pretended not to notice. The driver greeted her politely before opening the rear door. Inside sat Ethan. Not in a tuxedo. Not in an expensive custom suit. Just a navy sweater and dark trousers. For the first time since meeting him, he looked like an ordinary man. Well, an extraordinarily handsome ordinary man. You look surprised. I expected. She gestured vaguely. More billionaire. He looked down at himself. I disappoint. A little. Good. The car pulled away. For several minutes, neither spoke. Finally, Ethan broke the silence. So, Olivia looked through the window. The city slowly disappeared behind them. I'll do it. He didn't celebrate. He simply nodded. Thank you. 1 week. That, and after that, it's over. No extensions. No extensions. She pointed at him. I'm remembering this conversation. So am I. Two. The Sterling estate looked less like a home and more like a private resort. Rolling gardens stretched across acres of land. A fountain welcomed visitors at the entrance. The mansion itself overlooked a peaceful lake. Olivia stared through the car window. People actually live here. Ethan smiled. Technically, it has its own lake. It came with the property. It came with Wu. She stopped. I'm not finishing that sentence. Ethan laughed. Probably wise. Inside, the house somehow felt less intimidating than its exterior. Bright sunlight filled the rooms. Fresh flowers sat on tables. Family photographs lined the hallways. Olivia slowed near one picture. A teenage Ethan stood beside his parents and a smiling Eleanor. Everyone looked genuinely happy. You were smiling. I used to. She looked at him. That sounded sad. It wasn't meant to. Before either could continue, a cheerful woman entered carrying a tablet. Good morning. Ethan, you've arrived. She turned toward Olivia. You must be Miss Bennett. I'm Grace. Mr. Sterling's executive assistant. Olivia smiled. It's nice to meet you. Grace handed Ethan a thick folder. Today's schedule. Olivia glanced at it. It looked terrifying. Interviews. Photographs. Lunch meeting. Board meeting. Charity planning. Dinner. She looked at Ethan. Is every day like this? Usually worse. When do you relax? I'll you know if I ever find out. East be mid-morning. Olivia found herself inside an enormous wardrobe room. Rows of clothing lined the walls. Shoes. Accessories. Even handbags arranged by color. A professional stylist entered carrying several garment bags. Miss Bennett. I'm Sophia. We have quite a bit of work to do. Olivia looked confused. Work. The media. She smiled kindly. They'll notice everything. For the next 3 hours, Olivia experienced a world she never knew existed. Wardrobe consultations, hairstyling, media coaching, walking lessons, even instructions on where to stand during photographs. At one point, Sophia adjusted Olivia's posture. Shoulders relaxed. Chin slightly higher. Smile with your eyes. Olivia laughed. I didn't realize smiling had instructions. It does. She demonstrated. The difference between looking happy, she smiled politely, and looking in love. Olivia immediately looked away. I'm definitely not learning that. V2. Later that afternoon, Ethan found Olivia practicing introductions in one of the drawing rooms. Good afternoon. She offered her hand dramatically. I'm Olivia Bennett. He shook it. You look terrified. I've been professionally corrected for breathing. He laughed. Sophia means well. I'm sure she does. Olivia collapsed onto a sofa. I had no idea wealthy people work this hard just to attend lunch. We don't. You definitely do. He sat opposite her. How are you holding up? She thought for a moment. I still think this is crazy. Fair. But. She smiled. Your staff are surprisingly nice. They're family. I noticed. She looked around. They respect you. I try to earn that. There it was again. The version of Ethan nobody seemed to expect. The headlines described a ruthless billionaire. The employees described someone entirely different. Neither version felt complete. 2. That evening they practiced answering questions from imaginary reporters. Grace stood behind a camera. I'll ask common questions. Olivia nodded nervously. Grace smiled. Miss Bennett, what attracted you to Ethan? Olivia froze. Ethan whispered, just answer honestly. She looked at him. Honestly. He nodded. She thought for several seconds. She hesitated. Much kinder than people realize. The room became unexpectedly quiet. Grace lowered the camera. That sounded genuine. Because it was. Grace turned toward Ethan. Your turn. What attracted you to Olivia? Ethan answered without hesitation. She treats everyone exactly the same. Olivia looked at him. What? I've watched you. You thank every employee. You remember names. You notice people. He smiled. Most don't. Olivia felt strangely embarrassed. I was just being polite. Exactly. Grace cleared her throat. I think the camera would believe both of those answers. Neither Ethan nor Olivia spoke. For the first time since the arrangement began, they had answered questions without pretending. That night, Olivia wandered onto one of the estate's quiet terraces. The lake reflected thousands of stars. The air was cool, peaceful. She heard footsteps behind her. Eleanor told me I'd find you here. Olivia smiled. I needed some quiet. Ethan stood beside the railing. So did I. They looked across the water in comfortable silence. After several minutes, Olivia asked, Can I ask you something? Of course. Why haven't you corrected anyone? Ethan frowned slightly. What do you mean? You've never once called me your fiancé. He looked thoughtful. Because you're not. You let everyone assume it. I do. But you never say it. He nodded. I promised I wouldn't lie to you. Olivia considered that. It was a small distinction, yet somehow it mattered. A great deal. She looked across the lake again. This week is going to be interesting. Ethan smiled. I've had the same feeling. And neither realized that somewhere beyond the estate gates, photographers were already waiting. And while Olivia was learning how to play the role of a billionaire's fiancée, someone else had begun asking a much more dangerous question. Who was Olivia Bennett really? The first camera appeared before breakfast. Olivia noticed it through the dining room window. A long lens, barely visible beyond the front gates. She frowned. They've been here since 6. Grace glanced outside before pouring another cup of coffee. Only 2 photographers today. Olivia looked at her. Only? Grace smiled sympathetically. You'll get used to it. I sincerely hope I don't. Across the table, Ethan lowered the morning newspaper. They won't cross the property line. How can you be so calm? Because if I react, they win. Olivia looked outside again. The photographers waited patiently. They weren't shouting. They weren't trespassing. They simply watched, waiting for someone to make a mistake. It feels strange. It always does. Ethan folded the newspaper. They're not really interested in us. They're interested in the story. And stories sell. Olivia quietly stirred her coffee. So I'm a headline now. For a little while, I preferred being invisible. Ethan smiled faintly. I miss that too. The morning schedule looked surprisingly ordinary, at least at first. Breakfast, a short meeting with the foundation's scholarship committee, lunch with senior executives, an afternoon interview for a business magazine. Olivia glanced at the printed itinerary. You actually schedule lunch? If I don't, Ethan pointed toward the folder. Someone schedules something else. That sounds exhausting. It can be. They walked toward the conference room together. Employees greeted Ethan warmly as they passed. Good morning. Morning. Mr. Sterling. What happened to ruthless billionaire? Ethan looked confused. Olivia grinned. The newspapers make you sound terrifying. They've never attended budget meetings. She laughed. No. They're considerably less dramatic. The scholarship committee meeting lasted nearly 2 hours. Olivia had expected numbers. Instead, she found herself listening to teachers, volunteers, and community leaders discussing students who needed financial help. One woman presented photographs from a science program. Another described a teenager who had become the first person in her family accepted into college. Ethan listened more than he spoke. When someone proposed reducing funding for a mentorship initiative, he quietly asked a question. How many students benefited last year? Almost 400. And what would we save by eliminating it? The finance director named a figure. Ethan nodded. And what would those 400 students lose? Nobody answered immediately. Finally, the proposal disappeared from the agenda. As the meeting ended, Olivia walked beside him. I thought billionaires only cared about profit. I care about keeping the company healthy. That's not the same thing. No. He looked toward the departing volunteers. My parents believed businesses should improve people's lives. You mention them often. I try to. Olivia noticed something gentle in his voice whenever he spoke about them. She didn't ask why. Not yet. After lunch, Grace approached carrying another folder. The interview has been moved. When? In 30 minutes. Ethan sighed. Of course it has. Grace looked apologetic. They're insisting on photographs with both of you. Olivia groaned. I knew there was a catch. You'll be fine. I'm becoming suspicious every time someone says that. The interview took place inside Ethan's executive office. A journalist named Melissa greeted them warmly. Thank you both for making time. She settled into a chair opposite them. I promise this won't be painful. Olivia smiled. I've learned not to trust promises that begin that way. Melissa laughed. I like her already. The question started professionally. Sterling Holdings, charitable programs, future investments. Then, almost casually, so. She looked at Olivia. How did the two of you actually meet? Olivia glanced toward Ethan. He gave the slightest nod. She answered honestly. Why, met through work. Not the whole truth, but true. Melissa smiled. And first impressions? Olivia considered the question. I thought he looked very serious. Ethan nodded. Accurate. Melissa turned to him. And you? I thought she'd tell me no. Olivia blinked. That was your first impression. It was. Melissa looked between them. You seem comfortable together. Neither answered immediately. Finally, Ethan said, We're learning. The interview continued for another 20 minutes. When it ended, Melissa gathered her notes. I've interviewed hundreds of couples. She smiled thoughtfully. The interesting ones are never the perfect ones. After she left, Olivia looked at Ethan. What did she mean? I have no idea. Later that afternoon, Olivia wandered through a quiet hallway she'd never noticed before. Unlike the formal rooms downstairs, this part of the house felt personal. There were framed photographs everywhere. Vacations, birthday celebrations, graduation ceremonies. A much younger Ethan laughing beside a sailboat. Another photograph showed him standing between a man and woman who shared his smile. His parents. Olivia paused. The photograph stopped abruptly after one particular year. Nothing newer. She heard footsteps. Ethan, I've been looking for you. I'm sorry. She gestured toward the wall. I wasn't snooping. He joined her. You found the family wing. She noticed him studying the photographs. They're beautiful. They're old. His voice had changed. Quieter. She looked at the picture again. What happened? For a long moment, he didn't answer. Finally, my parents died 12 years ago. Olivia turned toward him. I'm so sorry. It was a plane accident. He spoke calmly. Almost too calmly. I was 23. Silence filled the hallway. I inherited everything almost overnight. The company. The responsibility. The expectations. He smiled without humor. I also inherited everyone's opinion about how I should live. Olivia understood more than he probably realized. You never had time to grieve. He looked surprised. No, I didn't. She nodded slowly. My father passed away when I was 16. Ethan looked at her. I didn't know. There wasn't much money. My mother worked 2 jobs. I started working after school. She smiled softly. I learned pretty quickly that life doesn't wait until you're ready. For the first time since meeting each other, they weren't billionaire or event planner. They were simply two people comparing old scars. That evening, Eleanor invited them to dinner in the estate's smaller dining room. Unlike the grand ballroom-sized room Olivia had seen earlier, this one felt like a family home. Only 3 places had been set. No staff tonight, Eleanor announced. I'm making everyone behave like ordinary people. Grace laughed from the doorway. I'll pretend I didn't hear that. Dinner was surprisingly relaxed. Eleanor insisted on serving dessert herself. She asked Olivia about childhood vacations, favorite books, the first event she'd ever planned. Olivia found herself laughing more than she'd expected. At one point, Eleanor disappeared into another room. She returned carrying an old photo album. Oh no, Ethan muttered. Oh yes. She opened the first page. There. Olivia looked down. A teenage Ethan stood awkwardly beside a birthday cake. His hair was far too long. He wore enormous glasses. She covered her mouth to stop herself laughing. You had glasses. They were temporary. They were enormous. They were fashionable. Were they? New? Even Ethan laughed. Eleanor turned another page. This was his first charity event. Another. This was graduation. Another. Olivia noticed something. Every photograph before Ethan inherited the company showed him smiling easily. Every photograph afterward looked different. More formal, more careful, as though someone had slowly replaced joy with responsibility. Eleanor quietly closed the album. I missed that smile. Nobody spoke. Finally, Olivia looked toward Ethan. I think it's still there. He met her eyes, for short periods. Then maybe. She smiled gently. You should stop scheduling every minute. Eleanor laughed. I've been saying that for 10 years. Tea later that night, Olivia stepped outside onto the back terrace. The lake shimmered beneath the moonlight. She heard the door open behind her. Ethan joined her carrying 2 mugs. I guessed tea. You guessed correctly. He handed one to her. They stood together overlooking the water. No cameras. No reporters. No board members. Olivia smiled. Just silence. For now. She looked at him. Can I ask another question? You've already asked several. I'm keeping count. He nodded. Go ahead. You said people have opinions about how you should live. They do. What do they want? He laughed quietly. A perfect executive. A perfect son. A perfect public image. A perfect relationship. And you. What do you want? He didn't answer immediately. Instead, he watched the moonlight ripple across the lake. When I was younger, he finally spoke. I thought success would buy freedom. He smiled faintly. It mostly bought responsibility. Olivia leaned against the railing. I always imagined being wealthy meant solving problems. It solves some and creates others. He nodded. Exactly. For several moments, they simply listened to the water. The silence wasn't uncomfortable anymore. It was becoming familiar. Comfortable. Dangerously comfortable. Neither of them noticed the lights of a car slowing briefly outside the estate gates. Inside sat a woman wearing designer sunglasses despite the late hour. She lowered the passenger window just enough to study the mansion. So? Vanessa Lang whispered to herself. Who exactly are you? Olivia Bennett. A slow smile crossed her face. I think it's time we found out. Far from the quiet peace of the estate, someone had just decided that the billionaire's mysterious fiancé deserved a very thorough investigation. Olivia discovered something unexpected on her 4th morning at the Sterling estate. The mansion was loud, not because of arguments or staff rushing through endless tasks. It was loud because Eleanor Sterling believed silence was overrated. By 8 o'clock, classical music floated through the downstairs hallway. Someone was laughing in the kitchen. The housekeeper and gardener were debating whose roses looked better. Grace was politely reminding Ethan that he had exactly 6 minutes before his first video conference. And Eleanor was attempting to convince the chef that blueberry pancakes counted as a perfectly acceptable breakfast before an important board meeting. They improve morale, she insisted. They also improve my mood. The chef looked helpless. Orma says, Sterling, I'm 72. I've earned pancakes. Olivia couldn't help laughing. Eleanor noticed immediately. There you are. She pointed toward an empty chair. Sit. I'm not interrupting. You'll only interrupt if you refuse breakfast. Olivia sat down. The chef placed a plate of pancakes in front of her. I didn't order these. You don't argue with grandmothers. Eleanor nodded wisely. It's one of life's simpler rules. Across the room, Ethan entered while fastening the cuffs of his navy shirt. He looked from Olivia to the pancakes to his grandmother. I see you've started recruiting. I've started feeding. Same thing. He leaned down and kissed Eleanor on the forehead. Morning. She smiled. You look tired. I've had meetings. You've always had meetings. Exactly. She looked at Olivia. See what I mean? Olivia grinned. I do. For just a moment, the mansion didn't feel like the home of one of the country's wealthiest families. It simply felt like a family. 2-2 breakfast ended with Brace placing another schedule beside Ethan. 3 interviews. 2 investor calls. A lunch with the hospital foundation. And she looked toward Olivia. Mrs. Sterling has already volunteered both of you for this afternoon. Ethan frowned. What did you volunteer us for? Eleanor smiled innocently. The community garden. He blinked. The what? The scholarship students are planting new trees. You haven't been in years. I thought perhaps. She glanced at Olivia. It was time. Grace quietly hid a smile. Ethan looked at Olivia. You don't have to. Olivia shrugged. I'd rather plant trees than attend another interview. Excellent. Eleanor clapped her hands. Settled. The community garden sat only 20 minutes from downtown. It wasn't glamorous. There were no cameras waiting. No reporters. Just volunteers carrying watering cans and gardening gloves. Olivia stepped out of the SUV and breathed deeply. This is nice. Ethan looked around. I forgot how peaceful it is. A volunteer recognized him almost immediately. Mr. Sterling. She hurried over. It's good to have you back. I should have come sooner. She smiled. The students will be happy. Within minutes, they were handed gloves and small shovels. Olivia laughed. I definitely wasn't expecting this. What were you expecting? Probably another ballroom. I prefer this. She looked at him. You mean that? I do. They spent nearly 2 hours planting young maple trees alongside scholarship recipients and local volunteers. Nobody treated Ethan like a billionaire. They simply handed him tools. Asked him to move bags of soil. One elderly volunteer even corrected the way he was holding a shovel. No. She shook her head. Like this. Ethan immediately adjusted his grip. Yes, ma'am. Olivia laughed so hard she nearly dropped her watering can. What? You just got gardening lessons. I've received worse. The older woman looked toward Olivia. He always forgets the roots. I've noticed. By lunchtime, both of them had dirt on their clothes. Olivia brushed soil from Ethan's sleeve. You missed a spot. He glanced down. So did you. Without thinking, he gently brushed a streak of dirt from her cheek. His hand paused for the briefest second. Their eyes met. Everything around them seemed to disappear, until someone shouted, "Smile over here!" Both of them turned instinctively. A local newspaper photographer stood near the entrance. Camera raised. Olivia immediately stepped back. Too late. The photograph had already been taken. The picture appeared online before they even reached the estate. Billionaire, couple spend morning helping local students, Grace, showed them the article during the drive home. They work quickly. Olivia groaned. I have dirt on my face. Ethan looked at the screen. You look happy. She looked closer. He was right. The smile hadn't been practiced. Neither of theirs had. That somehow bothered her more. Later that afternoon, Ethan disappeared into another board meeting. Olivia wandered through the gardens behind the mansion. Rows of roses stretched toward a quiet gazebo overlooking the lake. Eleanor was already there, reading. Or at least pretending to. I thought you might come. Olivia smiled. How? I've raised grandchildren. We become predictable when we're thinking too much. Olivia sat beside her. I wasn't trying to hide it. No. You were trying to understand it. They watched ducks glide peacefully across the water. After several quiet moments, Eleanor closed her book. May I ask you something? Olivia hesitated. Of course. What do you see when you look at Ethan? The question caught her completely off guard. She searched for an answer that wasn't a lie. I see someone who's trying very hard not to disappoint anyone. Eleanor smiled softly. Exactly. She looked across the lake. When Ethan inherited Sterling Holdings, her voice became quieter. Everyone told him what kind of man he needed to become. The board. The investors. The media. The advisors. They all wanted certainty. They all wanted perfection. Olivia listened without interrupting. They forgot he was still grieving. Eleanor folded her hands. He spent so many years becoming the man everyone expected. She smiled sadly. That I worry he forgot who he wanted to become. The word stayed with Olivia. Because over the past few days, she had begun seeing it too. The polished executive. The careful public speaker. The responsible grandson. The billionaire. Every version of Ethan served someone else's expectations. Very few served himself. As evening approached, Olivia returned inside. She found Ethan sitting alone in the library. No laptop. No phone. No paperwork. Just silence. She leaned against the doorway. I thought billionaires didn't have free time. He looked up. I canceled a meeting. She raised an eyebrow, voluntarily. I'm trying something new. She smiled. How's it going? I don't know what to do. She laughed. Seriously? I've forgotten. She walked over to one of the bookshelves. Thousands of books lined the walls. You've read all these? Most. She pulled out a worn mystery novel. You kept this one. It was my mother's favorite. Olivia carefully opened the first page. A handwritten message filled the inside cover. F. To Ethan. Never stop being curious. The world always has another story waiting for you. Love, Mom. She quietly closed the book. She sounds wonderful. She was. Ethan accepted the novel from her. I haven't read it in years. You should. He smiled faintly. Maybe. That evening, Grace informed them of another television interview scheduled for the following morning. Olivia sighed dramatically. I was beginning to enjoy being anonymous again. I'm afraid that's over. Grace handed her a folder. The interviewer enjoys asking unexpected questions. Wonderful. Ethan glanced through the notes. We'll manage. Olivia looked at him. You always sound confident. I'm usually improvising. You hide it well. So do you. She looked surprised. I'm terrified half the time. I know. You do. You keep twisting your bracelet whenever you're nervous. Olivia immediately looked down. Her fingers were resting on the delicate silver bracelet she'd worn for years. She quickly let go. I didn't even realize. I noticed on the first night. She smiled. You pay attention. I have to. No. She shook her head. You don't. You choose to. The words lingered between them. Neither knew quite how to respond. Too later after dinner, Olivia stepped onto the terrace for fresh air. The sky had turned deep blue. Stars reflected across the lake. She heard footsteps behind her. Ethan handed her 2 mugs. Tea. I'm beginning to think this is becoming a tradition. I'm not opposed. They stood quietly together. Finally, Olivia spoke. Your grandmother asked me something today. Oh, she asked what I see when I look at you. Ethan smiled. That sounds like her. I answered honestly. What did you say? She looked out across the water. I said I see someone trying very hard not to disappoint everyone. Silence. Long enough that Olivia wondered if she'd said too much. Finally, Ethan laughed quietly. She's going to like that answer. It wasn't for her. I know. He looked at the stars. You know? He hesitated. I've spent years thinking people only stayed because of what I could provide. Olivia turned toward him. Money. Influence. Opportunity. He shrugged. It's difficult to know who actually sees you. She thought carefully before answering. I think you're wrong. He looked at her. I've watched the people who work here. They respect you when you're not in the room. You can't buy that. For a moment, neither spoke. Then Ethan smiled. A real smile. Unforced, it reached his eyes. Olivia realized she'd never seen that smile before. And somehow, seeing it made the lie between them feel just a little more complicated. Far beyond the estate, in an upscale office overlooking the city, Vanessa Lang studied a thick folder that had just been placed on her desk. The cover contained only one name, Olivia Bennett. Vanessa slowly opened it. Let's see. She smiled coldly. Who you really are. The investigation had officially begun. The interview was supposed to last 20 minutes. It lasted nearly an hour. Olivia sat beneath bright studio lights, reminding herself to breathe naturally while the host introduced Ethan's latest charitable initiative. So, the host said with an easy smile, before we discuss scholarships and community projects, I think everyone watching wants to know one thing. Olivia already knew what was coming. How did the two of you fall in love? She resisted the urge to glance at Ethan. Instead, she smiled politely. It wasn't exactly one moment. That much was true. The host leaned forward. So it happened gradually. Olivia nodded. I think the best relationships usually do. Ethan looked at her with the slightest hint of surprise. The answer hadn't been rehearsed. It had simply appeared. The host smiled. That's probably the most believable answer we've heard all week. The interview moved on. Education. Business. Charitable foundations. Thankfully, no one pressed further. When the cameras finally switched off, the host shook both their hands. You two are surprisingly easy to interview. Ethan laughed. Most people would disagree. I've interviewed celebrities who couldn't spend 5 minutes in the same room together. She smiled. You two actually listened to each other. Olivia wasn't sure whether that observation was comforting or alarming. Back at Sterling Holdings headquarters, Grace met them near the executive elevators. Mr. Sterling. She looked unusually serious. The board meeting has been moved forward. Ethan frowned. Why? Victor Lang requested an unscheduled visit. Olivia noticed the change in Ethan's expression. Not fear. Preparation. That was quick, he muttered. Grace nodded. He arrived 15 minutes ago. She turned toward Olivia. Would you mind waiting upstairs? Olivia smiled. I think that's probably for the best. The executive lounge occupied the top floor of the building. It overlooked nearly the entire city. Grace poured coffee while Olivia wandered toward the windows. Who's Victor Lang? Grace joined her. Chairman of Lang Global. The real estate company? Grace nodded. They've competed with Sterling Holdings for decades. I thought business rivals just argued over contracts. They usually do. Grace hesitated. But Mr. Lang takes things personally. Before Olivia could ask another question, the elevator doors opened. A man in an impeccably tailored charcoal suit stepped into the lounge. Silver hair, confident stride, commanding presence. He looked around once before his eyes settled on Olivia. You must be Miss Bennett. His voice was calm, measured. Olivia smiled politely. And you must be Mr. Lang. I am. He extended his hand. She accepted it. It's a pleasure. The pleasure, Victor replied with a faint smile, depends entirely on how honest this conversation becomes. Olivia felt something tighten in her chest. Grace stepped forward. Mr. Lang, Mr. Sterling will join you shortly. Victor never took his eyes off Olivia. So I've heard. With the silence stretched for several seconds. Victor slowly walked toward the windows. I've known Ethan since he was younger than you. Olivia remained composed. I'm sure you have. He's an exceptional businessman. He is. Victor turned slightly. And remarkably private. Olivia said nothing. Imagine my surprise when I wake up to discover he's suddenly engaged. There it was. Not an accusation. Not yet. Just curiosity sharpened into a weapon. Olivia chose her words carefully. Life can be surprising. Victor smiled. It certainly can. The elevator doors opened again. Ethan stepped inside. Victor. Ethan. The two men shook hands, professional, polite, completely unreadable. I hope I haven't interrupted. Ethan smiled. Only our coffee. Victor laughed softly. I've always admired your diplomacy. He glanced toward Olivia. And your timing. The three of them moved into Ethan's office. Grace quietly closed the doors. Victor declined coffee. Instead, he walked around the room examining framed architectural models displayed on the shelves. You've expanded considerably. We've been fortunate. Fortunate. Victor looked back. I'd call it relentless. Ethan smiled. I'll accept either. Victor finally sat down. I'll save us both time. He folded his hands. My investors have questions. They often do. They're wondering whether your recent announcement. He paused deliberately. Changes anything. The merger proceeds as planned. I assumed it would. Victor nodded slowly. But people are curious. He looked toward Olivia again. They know almost nothing about Miss Bennett. Olivia met his gaze without flinching. I've always preferred a quiet life. Victor smiled politely. I imagine that's changing. It certainly has. For a moment, nobody spoke. Finally, Victor stood. I look forward to meeting you properly another time. He adjusted his jacket. I'm sure we'll see quite a bit of each other. After he left, the office remained silent. Grace was the first to speak. I don't like that. Neither did Olivia. An hour later, Ethan drove them back to the estate himself. Neither spoke for several minutes. Finally, Olivia broke the silence. He's dangerous. Ethan nodded. Very. He barely asked any questions. He didn't need to. Olivia looked at him. What does that mean? He was measuring your reactions. And I think you passed. I don't feel like I passed anything. You stayed calm. I was terrified. He smiled. I couldn't tell. Olivia looked out the window. I have a feeling he's going to keep digging. He will. And if he finds out the truth. Ethan tightened his grip on the steering wheel. Then we'll deal with it. She wasn't convinced. Neither was he. That evening, Eleanor insisted everyone eat dinner on the back terrace. The weather is too beautiful to waste indoors. The lake reflected the colors of the setting sun. Birds drifted lazily across the water. For a little while, the pressure of the outside world seemed far away. Eleanor looked at Ethan. You've been thinking. I usually am, blind. Too much. She smiled knowingly. Then she turned toward Olivia. Have you seen the old greenhouse yet? Olivia shook her head. No. You should. It was my husband's favorite place. After dinner, Eleanor led Olivia through the gardens until they reached a restored glass greenhouse tucked behind flowering hedges. Inside were hundreds of orchids, roses, and climbing vines. It's beautiful. Eleanor smiled. My husband believed gardens teach patience. Olivia slowly walked between the flowers. I can see why. Eleanor stopped beside a blooming white rose. You care about Ethan. The statement came so suddenly that Olivia almost laughed. We've only known each other a few days. I didn't ask how long. I simply said you care. The Olivia looked down at the flowers. I don't want him to get hurt. Eleanor's smile softened. Neither do I. She gently touched Olivia's hand. Sometimes life introduces the right person in the strangest possible way. The Olivia's chest tightened. If only Eleanor knew. Later that night, Ethan found Olivia sitting alone in the greenhouse. I thought I'd find you here. It's peaceful. He sat beside her on a wooden bench. I owe you another apology. You've apologized enough. No. He looked at the glass ceiling above them. I brought you into a situation that's becoming more complicated every day. Olivia gave a small smile. I noticed. I meant what I said. If this becomes too much, I can leave. He nodded. Immediately. She studied him for a moment. Why do you trust me? The question seemed to catch him off guard. I don't know. You barely know me. I know enough. Like what? He thought for a long moment. I know you thanked every volunteer at the garden. You remembered the chef's name after hearing it once. You asked Grace how her father was doing. Olivia frowned. Those are ordinary things. They shouldn't be rare. He smiled. But they are. The greenhouse fell quiet again. Outside, the wind gently rustled the trees. Olivia looked at Ethan. You know, she said softly, when I first met you, I thought you were just another billionaire. And now, she smiled. Now I think you're just another overworked man who forgets to eat lunch. He laughed. I did skip lunch. I know. Grace told you. No. She pointed toward the untouched sandwich he'd carried into the greenhouse without realizing it. You brought it with you. He looked down, then laughed even harder. I suppose I did. For the first time in days, the conversation required no pretending. No rehearsed answers. No careful performances. Just two people sharing an ordinary moment. Neither noticed the black sedan parked outside the estate gates. Inside, Vanessa Lang lowered a pair of binoculars. A private investigator sat behind the wheel. I've checked her business records, he said. Nothing unusual. Vanessa kept watching the greenhouse. Keep looking. People don't appear out of nowhere. She smiled faintly. And neither do fiancés. Somewhere in the growing darkness, the first real threat to Olivia and Ethan's carefully constructed story had begun taking shape. By Friday morning, Olivia had developed an unusual skill. She could tell the difference between Ethan's genuine smile and the one reserved for cameras. The genuine one reached his eyes. The public one stopped just short of them. It was a small difference. Most people would never notice. Olivia noticed every time. 10 minutes. The Grace stood outside the breakfast room with a tablet tucked beneath one arm. Morning interview. Followed by the Children's Literacy Foundation luncheon. She scrolled farther down. Then the charity auction preview. And finally, she sighed dramatically. The Harmony Hospital fundraising gala. Olivia looked at Ethan. Do you always have this many events? No. She raised an eyebrow. No. I usually have more. She stared at him. I've decided I don't want to be a billionaire anymore. I wasn't aware applications had opened. Good. Grace interrupted before either of them could continue. The press has started referring to you as... She hesitated. The city's favorite couple. Olivia nearly dropped her coffee. They've what? Grace turned the tablet around. There were dozens of headlines. Sest tichi waman buecho gitihan stiar. Iis tabisi busen ss tide of finus hefiinus sipanas ft lovistuar nobuduisa becoming gg. Olivia covered her face. I don't like any of these. I suspected you wouldn't. Ethan quietly took another sip of coffee. I've been called worse. With their first stop was a radio station. Unlike television, there were no cameras. Only microphones. It should have felt easier, it didn't. The host greeted them enthusiastically. It's wonderful to finally meet both of you. He looked toward Ethan. You've become considerably more interesting recently. I wasn't aware I had been boring. The host laughed. I said more interesting. Olivia smiled. That's a diplomatic correction. The interview focused mostly on the upcoming scholarship fundraiser. Halfway through, however, the host asked, So, what's the biggest surprise you've discovered about each other? Olivia blinked. That definitely wasn't on Grace's preparation notes. She looked toward Ethan. He gave the slightest shrug. Honesty, then. I'll go first. She smiled. I thought Ethan would be intimidating. The host nodded. And? Instead, she laughed softly. He apologizes to furniture when he accidentally bumps into it. The room fell silent. Ethan stared at her. I did that once. 3 times. It was an unusually narrow hallway. Everyone burst into laughter. Even Ethan. The host wiped away tears. I've interviewed politicians who were less careful. He turned toward Ethan. Your turn. Ethan looked thoughtfully at Olivia. I assume she planned everything. I do. Mostly. He smiled. But she also makes completely spontaneous decisions. Olivia frowned. I do not. You agreed to pretend to be engaged to a stranger. She opened her mouth, then closed it again. The host laughed even harder. Has got you there. So he does. The luncheon proved far less stressful. The foundation directors genuinely cared about the scholarship program. There were speeches, student presentations, volunteer awards. During the reception afterward, Olivia wandered toward a display showing photographs of previous scholarship recipients. A young woman approached. Excuse me. Olivia turned. The woman looked to be in her early 20s. Nervous. Holding a small notebook. I'm sorry to bother you. You're not bothering me. She smiled shyly. I wanted to say thank you. Olivia looked confused. For what? The young woman glanced toward Ethan across the room. Mr. Sterling helped pay for my engineering degree. She smiled proudly. I graduated last month. Olivia's eyes widened. Congratulations. Thank you. The young woman hesitated. He never talks about these things publicly. I thought maybe. She looked toward Ethan again. Someone close to him should know. Olivia watched Ethan across the room. He was listening attentively to an elderly donor, completely unaware of the conversation. How many students? Olivia asked quietly. Hundreds. He visits every graduation he can. The young woman smiled. He always sits in the back, never wants attention. After she walked away, Olivia remained standing in front of the display. Something about that conversation stayed with her. The newspapers described Ethan as ambitious, competitive, relentless. None of them mentioned the scholarships, the hospital donations, the anonymous gifts, or the graduation ceremonies. On the drive to the charity auction preview, Olivia finally spoke. Why, didn't you tell me? Ethan looked over. Tell you what? About the scholarships. Shrugged. It wasn't important. She stared at him. Hundreds of students have university degrees because of you. I had help. Ethan. What? That is important. He looked back at the road. My parents paid for my education. They always believed knowledge changes lives. I simply continued what they started. Olivia smiled softly. I think you'd make them proud. He didn't answer, but his expression became noticeably quieter. The charity auction occupied one of the city's historic museums. Paintings, rare books, vintage automobiles. Every item would be auctioned to support children's hospitals. Olivia admired a landscape painting while Ethan spoke with organizers. You've got good taste. She turned. A man about her age stood nearby. Dark hair, warm smile, simple navy blazer. He looked vaguely familiar. I'm sorry. The man smiled wider. You really don't remember me. Olivia studied his face. Then suddenly, Daniel, the one and only. She laughed in disbelief. What are you doing here? I designed the museum's renovation. He spread his arms dramatically. I suppose it turned out reasonably well. Olivia hugged him warmly. It's been years. 5, 6. Who's counting? Across the gallery, Ethan looked up just in time to see Olivia laughing. Grace quietly stepped beside him. You know him? Ethan shook his head. No. He seems familiar with Miss Bennett. He does. Grace noticed the slight change in Ethan's expression. Everything all right? Of course. but his eyes remained fixed across the room. Daniel and Olivia spent several minutes catching up. You still planning events? Barely. She smiled. It's getting better. I'm glad. Daniel looked around. I have to admit. He lowered his voice. I wasn't expecting to see you with Ethan Sterling. Olivia laughed nervously. Neither was I. Before Daniel could ask more, Ethan approached. Olivia immediately smiled. Ethan. This is Daniel Brooks. We used to work together years ago. Daniel extended his hand. It's nice to finally meet you. Ethan shook it politely. I've heard almost nothing about you. Daniel laughed. I suppose that's fair. The three of them stood together for a few moments. Daniel excused himself when another guest called his name. It was wonderful seeing you. You too. After he disappeared into the crowd, Olivia looked toward Ethan. What? He smiled. Nothing. That's not a nothing smile. I don't have different smiles. You definitely do. He looked genuinely confused. I do. You have at least 4. Grace quietly turned away to hide her own smile. The Harmony Hospital Gala began shortly after sunset. Crystal chandeliers illuminated the ballroom. A string quartet played softly. Doctors, philanthropists, and business leaders filled the room. Olivia and Ethan were seated together at the head table. Halfway through dinner, one of the hospital trustees leaned toward Olivia. I have to ask. She smiled warmly. How did Ethan propose? Olivia nearly choked on her water. Across the table, Ethan looked equally startled. For one brief second, neither had an answer. Then Ethan smiled calmly. We're keeping that story to ourselves. The trustee sighed happily. Oh, I love that. Olivia gently nudged Ethan beneath the table. Nice recovery. I panicked. I couldn't tell. I've had years of practice. Later that evening, the orchestra began playing slower music. Couples gradually moved toward the dance floor. Olivia watched them for a moment, then quietly looked away. I don't know how. Ethan turned. What? Dance? You've never danced. Not like that. He stood. Neither have I. She looked suspicious. I don't believe you. I attend charity galas. I don't ballroom dance. He offered his hand. We'll embarrass ourselves together. She laughed. That's a terrible sales pitch. Yet you're considering it. She looked at his hand, then slowly placed hers in it. The music had already begun. They stepped onto the dance floor. At first, both were awkward. Olivia accidentally stepped on Ethan's shoe. I'm sorry. I've survived worse. 30 seconds later, Ethan turned the wrong direction. My fault. I noticed. They laughed. Gradually, without either of them realizing, the awkwardness disappeared. The conversation faded. The ballroom blurred around them. Their movements became easier. Natural. Comfortable. Neither was thinking about cameras anymore. Neither was pretending. They were simply enjoying the moment. As the music ended, applause echoed through the ballroom. Not because they were perfect dancers. Because they looked happy. Truly happy. Standing near the ballroom entrance, unnoticed by almost everyone else. Vanessa Lang watched quietly. She had arrived late, just in time to see Ethan smiling in a way she had never seen during their own relationship. Her expression hardened. So, she whispered, that's the difference. She turned toward the private investigator waiting nearby. I don't care how long it takes. I want every detail about Olivia Bennett. The investigator nodded. I'm close. Vanessa looked back at the dance floor one last time. Good, because if she's hiding something. A slow smile crossed her face. I'm going to find it. The game had changed, and neither Olivia nor Ethan realized someone had just decided to make it personal. The photograph appeared on every major entertainment website before Olivia woke up. She stared at the headline while brushing her teeth. Easy Etienne Sterling Inikin Taki his fies ofis fiancée, Dinanti Gardi Jali. She sighed. They really can make a story out of anything. Another article caught her attention. CITS 50RD Cuddle UPL emails Heartothe Dan CE fellow R. Olivia quickly closed her phone. She wasn't interested in reading comments from strangers discussing a relationship that didn't exist. Or at least, wasn't supposed to. A gentle knock sounded on her bedroom door. Come in. Grace peeked inside. Good morning. I've brought coffee. Olivia accepted the mug gratefully. You may have just saved my life. The Grace smiled. Rough morning? The internet seems very convinced I'm in love. Grace hesitated for a moment. They're not the only ones noticing. Olivia looked up. What does that mean? Nothing. Grace quickly smiled. I'll let you finish your coffee. As the door closed behind her, Olivia frowned. That hadn't sounded like nothing at all. The breakfast was unusually quiet. Ethan skimmed through financial reports while Eleanor enjoyed the crossword puzzle. Olivia buttered a slice of toast. No one mentioned the articles. Finally, Eleanor folded her newspaper. I have wonderful news. Ethan looked up cautiously. Whenever you begin a sentence like that, I become nervous. You should. She smiled. I've invited both of you to tomorrow night's family dinner. Olivia blinked. Family dinner? Just a few cousins. Nothing formal? Ethan raised an eyebrow. You invited them already. I did. Eleanor? What? You know how this works. I know exactly how it works. She smiled innocently. They're excited to meet Olivia. Olivia glanced toward Ethan. He looked apologetic. I didn't know. I believe you. The Eleanor reached across the table and gently squeezed Olivia's hand. My family isn't interested in business. They're interested in people. Olivia forced a smile. I'll do my best. I know you will. The guilt returned. Sharper than before. 2 after breakfast, Ethan and Olivia drove into the city for a meeting with architects overseeing a new children's hospital wing. Daniel Brooks was already waiting when they arrived. He greeted Olivia with a broad smile. I was hoping you'd come. Olivia laughed. So was I. Daniel turned toward Ethan. Good to see you again. Ethan shook his hand politely. Likewise. The meeting lasted nearly 2 hours. Blueprints covered the conference table. Doctors discussed patient rooms. Architects debated natural lighting and accessibility. Olivia watched Daniel explain his design with genuine enthusiasm. He spoke less about buildings and more about the people who would use them. Children who needed brighter recovery rooms, parents who needed comfortable waiting areas, families who deserved hope. After the presentation ended, everyone began packing up. Daniel looked toward Olivia. Have you got a few minutes? She glanced at Ethan. I'll meet you downstairs, Ethan said. No rush. Daniel and Olivia walked slowly through the nearly completed hospital courtyard. Workers planted flowers along a winding pathway. It's strange seeing you again. Daniel smiled. I've been thinking the same thing. You disappeared. I moved to Seattle for a few years. I heard. He looked at her. I also heard your business has been struggling. Olivia sighed. News travels. You could have called. I didn't want sympathy. You would have gotten help. I know. She smiled sadly. That's exactly why I didn't call. Daniel nodded thoughtfully. You always were stubborn, so I've been told. They both laughed. A comfortable silence settled between them. You look happy. Daniel's voice was gentle. Olivia looked toward the hospital entrance where Ethan was speaking with a physician. She hesitated. It's complicated. I figured. Daniel smiled kindly. You don't have to explain. From the entrance, Ethan watched them talking. Grace stepped beside him. You've checked your watch 4 times. I have not. You have. He looked toward her. I'm waiting for the meeting to finish. Grace folded her arms. Of course. Ethan frowned. What? You've never cared how long meetings take. This one is different. Grace smiled knowingly. I noticed. He looked back toward Olivia. Daniel had just made her laugh again. Something unfamiliar settled in Ethan's chest. It wasn't anger. It wasn't irritation. It was uncomfortable, very uncomfortable. The drive back to the estate was noticeably quieter than usual. Olivia looked out the passenger window. Ethan kept his attention on the road. Finally, Olivia spoke. "You're quiet." "So are you?" I asked first. He smiled faintly. "I've got a lot on my mind." "Work." "Mostly." She looked at him for a moment. "You didn't like Daniel." "I never said that." "You didn't have to." Ethan considered denying it. Instead, "What makes you think that?" "You became unusually interested in traffic." He laughed. "I did. You also answered every question with one word." "I may have." Olivia smiled. "He's an old friend." "I know. We haven't seen each other in years." "I know." She studied him carefully. "Then what's bothering you?" Ethan tightened his grip on the steering wheel. For several seconds he didn't answer. Finally, "I suppose." He searched for the words. "I wasn't expecting to share you." Olivia stared at him. The words had escaped before he could stop them. The silence inside the car became almost unbearable. Ethan sighed. "Forget I said that." "No." She looked out the windshield. "I don't think I can." That evening, Olivia found herself replaying the conversation over and over. "I wasn't expecting to share you." It was a ridiculous sentence. They weren't together. She wasn't his. None of this was real. So why had those words stayed with her all afternoon? She wandered into the library hoping a book might distract her. Instead, she found Eleanor arranging flowers. "You've got your thinking face on." Olivia smiled weakly. "I have a thinking face." "You certainly do." Eleanor set the flowers aside. "Would you like to talk?" Olivia hesitated. "I don't know what I'm feeling." "That's usually the best reason to talk." Olivia sat beside her. Hypothetically, Eleanor smiled immediately. "I enjoy hypothetical conversations. If two people spend a lot of time pretending to care about each other. Mem. Is it possible to start confusing pretending with reality?" Well, Eleanor didn't answer immediately. Instead, she looked toward the window. "When I first met my husband," she smiled softly, "I disliked him." Olivia blinked. "You did?" It was arrogant. He thought he knew everything. "What changed?" He listened. Eleanor laughed quietly. "One day I realized I wasn't pretending to enjoy his company anymore." She looked back at Olivia. The heart rarely announces when it changes its mind. Olivia sat silently. "I don't know if that's comforting." "It isn't supposed to be." Later that night, Ethan stood alone on the terrace overlooking the lake. He hadn't touched the cup of tea growing cold beside him. He heard footsteps. Grace joined him. "I thought I'd find you here." "I needed air." Grace leaned against the railing. "You've been distracted all afternoon." "I've been working." "You've rewritten the same email 3 times. Ethan looked at her. "You notice too much." "It's part of my job." She smiled gently. "So, he already knew what she was going to ask." "I'm not answering." "You haven't heard the question?" "I know the question." Grace laughed. "Do you? You want to know why Daniel bothered me?" And Ethan looked out across the dark water. "I don't have a reasonable answer. Those are usually the important ones." He remained silent. Grace waited. Finally he spoke. "When I saw her laughing with him, he shook his head. I realized I wanted to be the reason she smiled." The words surprised even him. Grace smiled warmly. "I was wondering how long it would take." He looked at her. For you to notice." He gave a quiet, almost defeated laugh. "This arrangement is becoming a very bad idea." Grace nodded. "I suspect you're right." I'm upstairs in her room. Olivia stood by the window watching the lights reflected on the lake. Her phone buzzed. A message from Daniel. "It was really good seeing you today. Let's catch up properly sometime, Tar." She smiled. Before replying, another notification appeared. A news alert. Investiga GORs Kiarki Ian Jeff ORDALs ABUEKS Amserbian GAS Ministerios of INCE. Her smile faded. The article mentioned unnamed sources asking questions about her business, former clients, and personal history. Someone was digging deeper, much deeper. Olivia slowly locked her phone. The arrangement had already become emotionally complicated. Now it was becoming dangerous too. Somewhere across the city, Vanessa Lang closed another file and looked at the private investigator seated across from her desk. What have you found? Nothing scandalous. Vanessa frowned. Nothing. She's exactly who she claims to be. A hardworking event planner. No criminal record. No hidden fortune. No secret identity. Vanessa leaned back in her chair. Then keep looking. The investigator hesitated. I think she's just ordinary. Vanessa smiled coldly. No one changes Ethan Sterling's life that quickly by being ordinary. She closed the file. There's something we're missing. And she intended to find it. Saturday arrived with something neither Olivia nor Ethan had expected. Distance. Not physical, emotional. After the conversation in the car the previous afternoon, both of them seemed unusually careful around each other. They still smiled. Still talked. Still appeared perfectly comfortable to everyone else. But every sentence felt more measured. Every glance ended a little sooner than before. Neither wanted to examine why. Grace noticed immediately. She stood in the foyer with her ever-present tablet. You two are being polite. Olivia looked confused. We're always polite. New. Grace shook her head. You're professionally polite today. Ethan sighed. I wasn't aware there was a difference. There is. She smiled. Yesterday you interrupted each other. Today you're waiting for each other to finish every sentence. Olivia looked toward Ethan. I hadn't noticed. I had. Grace closed her tablet. Whatever happened. She pointed toward both of them. Fix it before tonight. Tonight. The Sterling Foundation's anniversary gala. Olivia groaned dramatically. I was hoping for one evening without cameras. Grace gave her an apologetic smile. I'm afraid the cameras were hoping otherwise. The afternoon passed in a blur of preparations. Hair styling. Wardrobe fittings. A final review of the evening schedule. Sophia adjusted the sleeve of Olivia's emerald evening gown before stepping back. There. Olivia studied herself in the mirror. I almost don't recognize myself anymore. Sophia smiled. Do you know what I think? What? I think you've stopped pretending to wear these clothes. Olivia frowned. I'm not sure that's a good thing. The gala occupied the rooftop ballroom of one of the city's tallest hotels. Floor-to-ceiling glass overlooked the skyline. Thousands of lights stretched toward the horizon. The evening breeze carried soft music across the terrace. As soon as Ethan and Olivia arrived, photographers surrounded them. Ethan! Olivia? This way. One picture together. They paused for a few photographs before entering the ballroom. Inside, the atmosphere felt lighter than most corporate events. Artists displayed their work. Students demonstrated science projects funded by Sterling scholarships. Musicians performed throughout the evening. Olivia wandered toward a photography exhibition featuring children whose lives had been changed by the foundation. Each portrait included a short story. A future doctor, a teacher, an engineer, a young musician. Ethan quietly joined her. I always stop here. They're incredible. He nodded. They're the reason we do all this. Olivia looked at him. You really mean that? I do. She smiled. I know. As the evening continued, the atmosphere became increasingly relaxed. They laughed with volunteers, spoke with donors, congratulated scholarship recipients. At one point Ethan found Olivia standing on the rooftop terrace overlooking the city. You disappeared. I needed 5 minutes. He stepped beside her. So did I. They watched the skyline in comfortable silence. After a while Olivia smiled. I've been thinking. Dangerous. So I've heard. She leaned against the railing. When this week started, she laughed softly. I thought you were impossible. And now, I think you're just terrible at resting. I'll accept that. She looked toward him. And you? What about me? What did you think when we first met? He smiled. I thought you were going to leave. I almost did. I know. You would have deserved it. I probably would have. Neither noticed how naturally the conversation flowed now. There were no rehearsed answers. No carefully planned responses. Just honesty. Grace appeared through the ballroom doors. Ethan. He turned. The foundation director needs your signature. I'll be right there. He looked toward Olivia. I'll only be a few minutes. I'll survive. She smiled. I'm getting good at entertaining myself. While Ethan attended the meeting, Olivia wandered through the rooftop garden surrounding the ballroom. Small lanterns illuminated winding pathways. Flowering trees swayed gently in the evening breeze. The city stretched endlessly beyond the glass safety barriers. She closed her eyes for a moment. The quiet felt wonderful. Then she heard raised voices. Near the far end of the terrace, two photographers stood arguing with hotel security. We're staying outside the private area. Those are the rules. We just need one photograph. Olivia quietly turned in the opposite direction. She had no interest in becoming tomorrow's headline again. She found a secluded corner overlooking the river below. For a few peaceful moments, she was alone, or so she thought. Easier to hide out here. She turned. Ethan walked toward her, loosening his tie. The meeting finished already. They only needed one signature. He stood beside her. I thought I'd escaped. So did I. They laughed together. Suddenly bright flashes lit up the terrace. One, then another. The photographers had discovered them. There they are! Look this way! They're outside the barrier. Hotel security immediately hurried toward the photographers, but the damage was done. More cameras appeared. More flashes. Olivia instinctively stepped backward. I really don't like this. Ethan looked around quickly. This way. He gently took her hand. Without another word, they hurried down a side staircase, leading toward the hotel's lower terrace. The photographers remained above, temporarily blocked by security. They continued walking, faster now, past empty outdoor seating, past decorative fountains, past rows of flowering plants. Finally, they reached a covered walkway open to the night air. Olivia stopped to catch her breath. I think. She laughed between breaths. I'm getting too old to outrun photographers. You did surprisingly well. I was motivated. Rain began falling. Soft at first, then suddenly much heavier. Within seconds, the stone pathway shimmered beneath the streetlights. Olivia looked upward. Perfect timing. Ethan laughed. It could be worse. How? I haven't thought that far ahead. They both started laughing. Really laughing. The kind that arrives only after stress finally breaks. Rain intensified. Wind carried cool droplets beneath the covered walkway. Olivia wrapped her arms around herself. I should have brought a jacket. Without hesitation, Ethan removed his suit jacket and placed it over her shoulders. You'll freeze? So will you? I'll survive. She looked at him. You always do this. What? Take care of everyone else first. He shrugged. It seems reasonable. She stepped a little closer. So who takes care of you? The question caught him completely off guard. For several long seconds, he couldn't answer. Finally, I don't know. The rain echoed around them. Neither looked away. Olivia noticed tiny drops of rain in Ethan's hair. He noticed the way she instinctively pulled his jacket closer around herself. Time seemed to slow. The city noise faded. The photographers, the headlines, the arrangement, the 1 week agreement. Everything disappeared. There was only the two of them, standing beneath the rain, looking at each other. Ethan spoke first. This is becoming complicated. Olivia smiled sadly. I know. I didn't plan for this. Neither did I. He took one small step closer. So what do we do? She looked into his eyes. I honestly don't. A sudden burst of camera flashes exploded from the far end of the walkway. The photographers had found another angle. Ethan. Olivia? Keese? For a split second both of them froze. Instinct took over. Ethan gently cupped Olivia's face. If we don't, he whispered, they'll follow us all night. She understood immediately. She gave the smallest nod. He leaned in. The kiss was supposed to last only a moment. Just long enough for the photographers to get their picture. Just another performance. Just another part of the arrangement. Instead, everything else disappeared. The rain, the cameras, the noise. Neither of them moved. Neither wanted to. When they finally stepped apart, both were breathing a little faster than before. Olivia stared at him. She couldn't finish the sentence. Ethan looked equally shaken. I'm sorry. She blinked. Why are you apologizing? Because. He searched for the right words. That didn't feel fake. Silence. The kind that says everything words cannot. Olivia looked away first. It didn't. Neither of them knew what to do next. The photographers had already gone. Satisfied with the photographs they'd captured. The performance was over. But something else had quietly begun. Something neither contract nor common sense could easily undo. As they slowly walked back toward the hotel, leaving enough space between them to look casual again, both were thinking exactly the same thing. The most convincing part of their fake engagement had just become completely real. The kiss followed them home, not in conversation, in silence. The drive back to the Sterling estate was unusually quiet. Rain streaked across the windshield, while the rhythmic sweep of the wipers became the only sound inside the car. Olivia watched the city lights blur together. Ethan kept both hands firmly on the steering wheel. Neither knew where to begin. Finally, Olivia spoke. I suppose we should talk about it. Ethan gave a small nod. We probably should. Another few seconds passed. Then they both spoke at exactly the same time. I'm sorry. The words overlapped. They looked at each other. Then, despite everything, they laughed. It broke the tension just enough to let them breathe again. Ethan shook his head. You first. Olivia looked down at the jacket still draped over her shoulders. I'm not apologizing because I regret it. His eyes shifted toward her. I'm apologizing because. She searched for the right words. I don't know what that means anymore. Neither did he. The estate was unusually quiet when they arrived. Most of the staff had already gone to bed. Only a few lights remained on in the main hallway. Grace was waiting near the entrance. She took one look at both of them. You got caught in the rain. Ethan nodded. We did. Grace looked from Ethan to Olivia. Then back again. She smiled very slightly. I'll have the kitchen send up some hot tea. You don't have to. I know. She continued walking toward the kitchen. I'm doing it anyway. After she disappeared, Olivia looked toward Ethan. She knows. Grace notices everything. I'm beginning to find that slightly terrifying. So am I. Neither was ready to sleep. Instead, they wandered into the mansion's kitchen. It was the first time Olivia had seen it empty. No chefs. No assistants. No polished presentation. Just a large, comfortable kitchen with warm wooden cabinets and soft lighting. Ethan opened one of the cupboards. What are you looking for? Pasta. She stared at him. You're cooking? I warned you. When? I'm terrible at resting. So instead you cook. When I'm stressed. Olivia folded her arms. Should I be worried? Probably. 20 minutes later, Ethan stood staring at a pot of boiling water with complete concentration. Olivia leaned against the counter. You know. She smiled. For someone who negotiates billion-dollar deals, you seem strangely intimidated by spaghetti. It's judging me. The spaghetti. It knows I'm inexperienced. She laughed so hard she nearly spilled her tea. I'm fairly certain the pasta has no opinion. You haven't met this pasta. She stepped beside him. Move. I've got it. You definitely don't. Together they prepared a simple late-night meal. Nothing elegant. Nothing expensive. Just pasta, vegetables, garlic, butter, and grated cheese. Olivia tasted a forkful. This is actually good. Ethan looked genuinely relieved. I was expecting something far less encouraging. You undersold yourself. I usually do. They carried their plates onto the back terrace. The rain had stopped. The air smelled fresh. Moonlight shimmered across the lake. For several minutes, they simply ate in comfortable silence. Then Olivia quietly asked, "Can I ask you something?" You've earned at least one question. How long were you engaged? Ethan rested his fork on the plate. Almost 2 years. That's a long time? It felt longer. What happened? He looked out across the lake. We looked perfect together. Olivia waited, at least from the outside. And inside, we treated the relationship like another business project. He smiled sadly. We were compatible, but not happy. Olivia understood immediately. You never loved each other. I cared about her. But I don't think either of us ever stopped performing. The sentence lingered between them. Olivia quietly looked at him. We're pretending, she said softly, and somehow we're having more honest conversations than most real couples. Ethan laughed. That's a frightening observation. It is. The next morning began with an unexpected change. Grace walked into the breakfast room carrying a different schedule. I've canceled 3 meetings. Ethan looked up in surprise. You canceled my meetings. I rescheduled them. She corrected herself. Mrs. Sterling insisted. Eleanor entered immediately carrying fresh flowers. I refuse to let either of you spend every waking hour working. Ethan looked amused. I'm sensing I don't have much choice. You don't. She smiled proudly. Today you're taking the day off. Olivia blinked. We are. You are. What are we supposed to do? Eleanor looked genuinely confused. Normal things. Like what? She thought for a moment. Visit the farmer's market. Walk through town. Eat ice cream. Talk. You know? She waved her hand. Ordinary people activities. With the town sat only 15 minutes from the estate. Without security. Without photographers. Without formal clothes. Ethan wore jeans and a simple navy sweater. Olivia chose a comfortable cream-colored jacket. For the first time since they met, no one looked twice at them. This feels strange. Ethan smiled. In a good way. In a wonderful way. They wandered through small shops. Stopped at a local bakery. Shared cinnamon rolls that Eleanor insisted they try. Olivia noticed Ethan greeting shop owners by name. You know everyone. I grew up here. I forget sometimes. What? That you had a normal childhood. He smiled. So do I, Plu? They eventually reached the town bookstore. Olivia disappeared almost immediately. Shelves stretched from floor to ceiling. She ran her fingers across familiar titles. You like mystery novels. Ethan had quietly appeared beside her. How did you know? You spent 5 minutes looking at them. She picked up one with a worn cover. My father used to read these. Ethan smiled. My mother too. They each selected a book. At the checkout counter, the elderly owner smiled warmly. Back again, Ethan. It's been a while. It has. The owner looked toward Olivia. You finally found someone who can convince him to take a day off. Olivia smiled awkwardly. I'm trying. Keep trying. The owner winked. The town's been attempting it for years. After leaving the bookstore, they walked slowly through the park. Children played in the distance. Dogs chased tennis balls. An elderly couple fed ducks near the pond. Everything felt wonderfully ordinary. Olivia sat on a park bench. I almost forgot what a normal Saturday feels like. Ethan sat beside her. I don't think I've had one in years. She looked toward him. Do you miss it? Every day. Then why not change? He smiled without looking away from the pond. Because 32,000 people depend on me. And who do you depend on? He didn't answer. Instead, after a long silence, he admitted, I don't think I've allowed myself to. Olivia reached over without thinking. She gently rested her hand on his. He looked down. Then back at her. Neither moved. Neither spoke. The gesture felt simple, natural, comfortable, far more intimate than the kiss had been, because this wasn't for photographers. There were no cameras, no audience, just the two of them. That evening they returned to the estate just before sunset. Grace met them in the foyer. You both look different. Olivia smiled. We bought books. I can see that. Grace folded her arms. That's not what I meant. Ethan raised an eyebrow. What did you mean? She smiled knowingly. You both look lighter, and neither answered. Because she was right. For a few precious hours. They had forgotten about the arrangement. Forgotten about the headlines. Forgotten about pretending. Later that night, Olivia sat on the terrace, reading the mystery novel she'd bought that afternoon. She heard footsteps behind her. Ethan carried 2 mugs of tea. I think we've officially created a habit. I don't mind. He handed her one of the mugs. They sat in comfortable silence beneath the stars. Finally, Ethan spoke. When this week ends, Olivia looked up from her book. What happens? She closed the novel slowly. I go back to my apartment. You go back to work. And you. I go back to meetings. They both smiled faintly. Neither liked the picture they had just painted. Because for the first time, going back to normal didn't feel comforting. It felt like losing something neither of them had expected to find. 2. If you're enjoying Olivia and Ethan's journey, don't forget to like the video and subscribe to the channel. It helps us continue bringing you heartfelt stories filled with unforgettable characters, emotional twists, and satisfying endings. Neither of them realized that while they were beginning to imagine a future beyond the arrangement, someone else was preparing to destroy it. Across the city, Vanessa placed a thick investigation file on her desk. The private investigator sat opposite her. I've confirmed every detail. Vanessa looked up, and Olivia Bennett is exactly who she claims to be. Vanessa slowly smiled. Then we stopped looking for who she was. The investigator frowned. What do we look for now? Vanessa closed the folder. We look for proof. She tapped the cover once. That this engagement was never real. Monday morning arrived with an uncomfortable sense of normality. The breakfast table was set. Grace reviewed Ethan's schedule. Eleanor reminded everyone to eat before rushing into another busy day. On the surface, nothing had changed. Yet both Olivia and Ethan carried the same quiet realization. Their agreement was supposed to end soon. Neither of them had mentioned it again. Neither seemed eager to. Grace entered carrying a stack of newspapers. She usually left them beside Ethan without comment. Today, she hesitated. Ethan. He looked up. What is it? She handed him the top paper. His expression changed almost immediately. Olivia leaned closer. The headline read WHO's Olivia Bennett. Her stomach tightened. The article wasn't openly hostile, but it questioned everything. Where had Olivia gone to college? Why had no one seen them together before the charity gala? Why had there been no public photographs of their relationship? Why had friends never mentioned Ethan before? None of the questions seemed unreasonable. That was exactly what made them dangerous. Olivia quietly set the newspaper down. They're getting closer. Ethan nodded. They've started asking the right questions. Grace looked uneasy. It gets worse. She placed another article beside the first. SPR Vertias INVs Tugtars Repuar TDLW Looki and Gay INTO BNH Dos BK Giro ND. Olivia looked toward Ethan. Private investigators. He didn't answer immediately. Finally, Victor wouldn't waste money on gossip. You think it's him. I think someone wants. Proof. Proof of what? He met her eyes. That we lied. The drive to Sterling Holdings headquarters felt longer than usual. Neither spoke much. Traffic moved slowly through the city. Reporters were already gathered outside the company entrance. Camera flashes greeted them the moment the car stopped. "Mr. Sterling? Olivia? Is the wedding still happening? Can you confirm the date? How long have you been together?" Grace quietly stepped out first. "I'll clear a path." Within seconds, security surrounded them. Ethan offered Olivia his hand. "You ready?" "No. Cool. Neither am I." They walked through the crowd together. Questions followed them all the way into the lobby. The executive boardroom was unusually tense. 12 directors sat around the long conference table. Several looked relieved when Ethan entered. Others looked worried. One director adjusted his glasses. "The media attention is becoming significant." Ethan remained calm. "The merger? Still on schedule." Another director leaned forward. "But investors are requesting reassurance." "What kind?" "They want stability." Olivia quietly remained near the back of the room. She had never intended to attend the meeting, but Ethan had asked her to sit in. Not to speak, simply to be present. One older board member smiled kindly toward her. "It's nice to finally meet you." Olivia smiled politely. "You as well." The chairman cleared his throat. "The press believes congratulations are appropriate." He looked toward Ethan. "We'd like to host a formal engagement celebration after the merger." The room immediately filled with approving nods. Olivia felt her heartbeat quicken. An engagement celebration. That hadn't been part of the plan. Ethan answered carefully. "I appreciate the suggestion, but not immediately." The chairman looked surprised. "Why delay? We're both private people." It wasn't a refusal, but it bought time. For now, after the meeting ended, Olivia waited in Ethan's office. She stood near the windows overlooking the city. "You handled that well." Ethan loosened his tie. "I delayed the problem. You didn't solve it." "No." He walked toward the coffee machine. "I've become very good at delaying impossible conversations." She smiled faintly. "I've noticed." He handed her a cup. "Thank you." They stood together in silence. Finally, Olivia spoke. "This is getting bigger." "I know. I don't want your company paying the price for me. It isn't because of you. It feels like it." He shook his head. "No. It's because people assume they deserve every detail of someone else's life." Grace knocked gently before entering. "I've got something." As she handed Ethan a printed report. "Our media team tracked where today's rumors originated." Ethan scanned the first page. His expression hardened. "What is it?" He handed the report to Olivia. Several online articles had all cited the same anonymous source. Someone claiming to have inside information. Someone insisting the engagement was staged. There was no proof. Only speculation. But speculation spread quickly. Grace folded her arms. "The source has contacted 3 different reporters." Olivia looked up. "Can we find them?" Grace nodded slowly. "We're trying." That afternoon, Ethan insisted they leave the office through a private exit. "I'd rather avoid another crowd." Olivia agreed immediately. As they crossed the underground parking garage, Ethan's phone rang. He answered after glancing at the screen. "Victor." Olivia stopped walking. She couldn't hear Victor's voice, only Ethan's responses. "I see. No. I'm not interested. If this concerns business, schedule a meeting." He ended the call. Olivia looked at him. What did he want? Ethan slipped the phone back into his pocket. "He invited us to dinner." She frowned. "That doesn't sound so bad. He specifically requested that you come." The silence between them lasted several seconds. "Why?" "So he can meet you properly." Olivia already knew. It wasn't really dinner. It was an interview. Tea. That evening, Eleanor found Olivia in the greenhouse. The flowers were beginning to bloom again. Their fragrance filled the warm glass room. "You've been hiding." Olivia smiled weakly. "Just thinking." Eleanor sat beside her. I've discovered that people rarely hide in greenhouses unless something is bothering them. Olivia laughed softly. I suppose that's true. She looked down at her hands. I'm afraid. Eleanor waited patiently. They're investigating me. I know. I don't have anything to hide. Then why are you afraid? Olivia's voice became quieter. Because sometimes the truth hurts people anyway. Eleanor studied her carefully. You care about Ethan. It wasn't a question. Olivia looked away. I wasn't supposed to. No one ever is. Eleanor smiled gently. Feelings have dreadful manners. They arrive without permission. Despite herself, Olivia laughed. They really do. Later that night, Ethan stood alone in his office. The mansion had grown quiet. Only the desk lamp illuminated the room. He stared at the investigation report again. Every page contained another rumor, another theory, another attempt to explain Olivia. He heard a knock. Come in. A Grace entered. You should go home. I will. She looked at the papers. You're worried. I am. About the merger. Ethan slowly shook his head. No. A Grace looked surprised. Then what? He leaned back in his chair. I'm worried Olivia is going to leave. Grace remained silent. He continued. Not because she wants to, but because she'll think it's the right thing to do. Grace nodded thoughtfully. And would she be wrong? He looked toward the dark window. I honestly don't know anymore. For the first time in years, a $1 billion merger wasn't the biggest problem in Ethan Sterling's life. Two across the city, Vanessa sat inside her office while the private investigator placed a flash drive on her desk. I finally found something. Vanessa's eyes narrowed. What is it? A timeline. He slid a folder across the desk. It proves Olivia and Ethan had never been seen together before the charity gala. Vanessa smiled slowly. It isn't enough. Not yet. But it's a beginning. She picked up her phone. I think it's time someone started asking questions. She looked at the folder one last time. In public. The quiet investigation was over. The real attack was about to begin. By Tuesday morning, the questions had become impossible to ignore. They weren't whispered anymore. They were printed in headlines. Discussed on television. Shared across social media thousands of times every hour. Olivia stood in the breakfast room staring at a news channel playing silently on the television mounted to the wall. Across the bottom of the screen scrolled a single sentence. She switched the television off. I've had enough. Ethan looked up from his coffee. So have I. Grace entered carrying her tablet. I'm afraid today won't be quiet. I assumed as much. She placed the tablet on the table. 3 different reporters have requested interviews. 2 financial networks want comments. And she hesitated. Someone leaked photographs of Olivia's apartment building. Olivia's face lost its color. My apartment. Grace nodded. The address wasn't published, but several photographs clearly show the building. Ethan stood immediately. Have security check the property. They already have. Grace gave Olivia a reassuring smile. They'll make sure nobody bothers your neighbors. Olivia sank back into her chair. This is getting out of control. An emergency board meeting began less than an hour later. The atmosphere inside Sterling Holdings' executive boardroom was noticeably different from every previous meeting. No relaxed conversations. No casual greetings, only concern. The chairman spoke first. Our investors are nervous. Ethan remained composed. The merger documents are complete. They are. The chairman folded his hands. But uncertainty affects confidence. Another director leaned forward. We need to end the speculation. How? The public wants answers. Silence settled across the room. Finally, one director cleared his throat. There is one solution. Everyone looked toward him. If the engagement is genuine, he smiled politely, announced the wedding. Several board members nodded. Others remained quiet. Olivia felt the room spinning. Wedding. She looked toward Ethan. He didn't react. Not immediately. Then he spoke. I'm not making personal decisions because financial analysts are impatient. The chairman sighed. Ethan. My answer is no. His voice remained calm. But final. The discussion ended there, at least officially. As they walked back toward Ethan's office, Olivia finally spoke. They're right. He stopped walking. What? They're asking for certainty. They're asking for control. She shook her head. Either way. She looked directly at him. This started because of me. No. It started because my real fiancé left. And because I asked you to help. You didn't create this. She smiled sadly. I helped create the lie. The word hung heavily between them. Lie. Neither had said it aloud in days. Hearing it now made everything feel painfully real again. Too shortly after lunch, Grace hurried into Ethan's office without knocking. Her calm expression had disappeared. Ethan. What happened? And she handed him her tablet. A live press conference was already underway. Victor Lang stood behind a podium outside Lang Global headquarters. Reporters crowded around him. Victor smiled politely. I've been asked several questions regarding Sterling Holdings. He paused. I have no interest in commenting on another company's private affairs. Several reporters shouted questions. Do you believe the engagement is real? Victor gave a careful smile. I believe. He adjusted the microphone. That transparency builds trust. Another reporter called out. Are you suggesting someone isn't being transparent? Victor shrugged lightly. I simply believe investors deserve honesty. Nothing he said was a direct accusation. But he didn't need one. Within minutes, every news channel began replaying the clip. Grace muted the video. He knows exactly what he's doing. Ethan nodded once. Yes. He wants us to react. The phones inside Sterling Holdings never stopped ringing. Investor relations, legal advisors, public relations teams, financial analysts. Everyone wanted a statement. Grace coordinated meetings while Ethan answered call after call. Olivia watched quietly from the sofa. For the first time, she felt completely helpless. The room seemed to revolve around a problem she had become part of but couldn't solve. Eventually, Ethan ended another call and rubbed his eyes. I'm sorry. Olivia looked up. For what? You shouldn't have to watch this. She gave a small laugh. I think we're past that. He walked over and sat beside her. I'll fix it. She studied him. How? I don't know yet. That's not like you. No. He smiled tiredly. It isn't. That afternoon, Eleanor invited Olivia to walk through the gardens. The weather had turned warm. Roses lined the stone pathways. A gentle breeze carried the scent of jasmine through the air. You've been carrying the weight of the world. Eleanor said it. So matter-of-factly that Olivia almost smiled. It feels that way. They continued walking. You know, Eleanor stopped beside a flowering magnolia tree. When my husband built this estate, she looked toward the lake. Everyone admired the house. But they never saw the foundation. Olivia listened. The foundation isn't beautiful. It isn't impressive. It's hidden. She turned toward Olivia. But without it, she smiled gently. Everything else collapses. Olivia frowned thoughtfully. I'm not sure I understand. You keep worrying about headlines, about investors, about appearances. Eleanor squeezed her hand. I'm asking you to remember the foundation. Ethan, the man, not the billionaire. Those words stayed with Olivia long after the walk ended. Late that evening, Ethan finally escaped the endless meetings. He found Olivia sitting on the terrace overlooking the lake. 2 untouched mugs of tea sat on the small table between them. You made tea. I wasn't sure you'd make it out here. I almost didn't. He sat beside her. For several minutes neither spoke. The silence wasn't awkward, only tired. Finally Olivia asked, Are you angry? He looked genuinely surprised. At you? She nodded. No. Not even a little. You should be. I asked you to step into my life. I don't regret saying yes. She smiled faintly. I do. He turned toward her. No. I regret. She looked down at her hands. That I made everything harder. Ethan leaned forward. Look at me. She slowly did. This company existed before we met. It'll exist after all this. Whatever happens, vow. He spoke carefully. Don't ever think your kindness was a mistake. Olivia felt tears threatening to form. She quickly looked away. Across town, Vanessa watched the day's news coverage with quiet satisfaction. The private investigator entered her office carrying another folder. I've spoken with 3 reporters. Vanessa muted the television. And they're asking questions publicly now. She smiled. Good. The pressure will keep building. The investigator hesitated. There is something else. What? I've looked into Olivia's finances. Vanessa leaned forward. Anything? Nothing illegal? But he slid a single page across the desk. She accepted a large payment from Sterling Holdings on the night of the charity gala. Vanessa's eyes widened. Can it be traced? Wes. She slowly smiled. There it is. The missing piece. Not proof of a fake engagement. Not yet, but proof that money had changed hands. And in the court of public opinion. That was often enough. Vanessa closed the folder. Arrange a press conference. The investigator looked surprised. You already have enough. No. She stood and walked toward the window overlooking the city. I have something much more useful. She smiled coldly. I have doubt. Back at the Sterling State, Olivia stared across the moonlit lake, unaware that the payment Ethan had insisted on making for one evening's help had become the very evidence someone intended to use against them. The arrangement that had begun with a handshake was now balanced on the edge of collapse. Olivia didn't sleep. She sat by the bedroom window until sunrise, watching the first light spread across the lake. The investigation report. The bank transfer. Victor's carefully chosen comments. Vanessa's growing campaign. Every piece pointed toward the same conclusion. Sooner or later, someone would discover why Ethan had transferred money to her on the night of the charity gala. And when they did, no explanation would sound convincing. Not to investors. Not to the media. Not to the board. Most importantly, not to the thousands of employees whose future depended on Sterling Holdings. She closed her eyes. There was only one way to stop it. 2. The next morning the mansion felt unusually tense. Grace stood in the foyer speaking quietly with the legal team over her headset. 2 security guards remained near the entrance. Television crews had gathered beyond the front gates. Even the staff moved more quietly than usual. Ethan walked into the breakfast room carrying another folder. I've got a meeting with the merger committee. Grace entered behind him. They've moved it to 11. They've also requested a statement afterward. Ethan sighed. Of course they have. Olivia watched him for several seconds. He looked exhausted. Not physically. Emotionally. She realized she had never seen him this tired. After breakfast, Ethan left for headquarters. Before getting into the car, he stopped beside Olivia. I'll be back this evening. She smiled. I know. If anything changes, you'll call? He nodded. I always do. For a moment it looked as though he wanted to say something more. Instead, he simply smiled. I'll see you later. She watched the car disappear through the gates, then quietly whispered, I'm not sure you will. What's Eleanor found Olivia standing inside the greenhouse. You've made a decision. It wasn't a question. Olivia nodded. I think I have. Eleanor walked beside her. The morning sun filtered through the glass ceiling, illuminating rows of blooming orchids. You love him. Olivia closed her eyes. The words no longer frightened her. Yes. She answered so quietly she almost didn't hear herself. I do. Eleanor smiled sadly. I thought so. Olivia looked toward the flowers. That's exactly why I have to leave. Eleanor frowned. My dear, if I stay, Olivia's voice trembled. Everything gets worse. The company, the merger, the board, the investigation. She shook her head. He'll keep protecting me, and eventually, she swallowed hard. He'll lose everything. Eleanor reached for her hand. Have you asked him what he wants?
Already know?
No? Eleanor smiled gently. You know what you think he should want. Those words lingered in the quiet greenhouse. Olivia spent afternoon packing. It didn't take long. She hadn't brought much. A few clothes. Several books. Her bracelet. The mystery novel she'd bought with Ethan. She paused while folding the navy evening dress she'd worn on the first night. Everything had changed because of that dress. She carefully placed it back into its garment bag. There was a soft knock. Grace stood in the doorway. I thought you might need these. She held out a small cardboard box. What is it? Things you've left around the house. Inside were small, ordinary items. A bookmark. A coffee mug she'd accidentally claimed as her favorite. A pair of gardening gloves from the community garden. A handwritten recipe from the chef. Olivia smiled through tears. I didn't realize I'd collected so much. Grace smiled back. You collected more than that. The room became quiet. Finally, Grace asked, You're leaving? Olivia nodded. I have to. Grace looked toward the packed suitcase. He isn't going to agree. I'm not giving him a choice. By late afternoon, Olivia was back in her apartment. The familiar silence greeted her. Nothing had changed. The same small kitchen. The same stack of unpaid invoices. The same narrow windows overlooking the busy street. Yet everything felt different. She walked slowly through the apartment. It suddenly seemed much smaller than she remembered. Her phone buzzed almost immediately. Grace.
Dice.
He just got home. A second message followed. He's looking for you. Olivia closed her eyes. A minute later, Ethan called. She couldn't answer. The phone rang again. Then again. Finally, it stopped. A message appeared instead. Where are you? She stared at the screen for a long time. Then typed only 3 words. I'm sorry, Ethan. She couldn't bring herself to send anything else. The Sterling estate had never felt so empty. Ethan walked through every room. The library, the terrace, the greenhouse, the kitchen where they'd cooked together. Nothing. He stopped beside Grace. When? This afternoon. Why didn't you call me? You were presenting the merger. I didn't want to interrupt. He looked around the silent hallway. She left a letter. Grace handed him an envelope. His name was written neatly across the front. He opened it immediately. The letter was short. Very short. Hey, Ethan, this started because you needed help. Somewhere along the way, it became something neither of us expected. I can't be the reason your company suffers. You deserve someone who doesn't put everything you've built at risk. Thank you for showing me kindness when I needed it most. Please don't come after me. Oh, Olivia. He read it twice. Then a third time. Finally, he folded it carefully. No. Grace looked at him. No. I'm not accepting this. E2 that evening, every major news network interrupted regular programming. Vanessa Lang stood before a crowd of reporters. Beside her was a large presentation screen. Ladies and gentlemen ours. She smiled politely. I believe the public deserves complete transparency. She displayed a document. A bank transfer. Sterling Holdings. Recipient Olivia Bennett. Dated the night of the charity gala. Gasps spread through the room. Vanessa continued. I'm not accusing anyone of wrongdoing. She paused. I'm simply asking a question. If this engagement began with love. She looked directly into the cameras. Why was money transferred before anyone even knew about it? Questions exploded across the room. Was Olivia paid? Was the engagement staged? Did Sterling Holdings mislead investors? Within minutes, every financial news channel carried the story live. Back at her apartment, Olivia watched the broadcast in stunned silence. It had happened, exactly as she'd feared. Her phone began ringing nonstop. Reporters, unknown numbers, former clients, friends. She switched it off. Across town, Ethan stood motionless in his office watching the same broadcast. The board members around him spoke all at once. Legal advisors demanded responses. Public relations teams suggested statements. He heard none of it. His eyes remained fixed on the screen. Then, quietly, almost to himself, he spoke. "This ends tonight." The room fell silent. One director looked at him. "What are you going to do?" Ethan picked up his suit jacket. "The only thing I should have done from the beginning." He walked toward the door. "I'm going to tell the truth." Behind him, dozens of stunned executives watched in complete silence. For the first time in years, Ethan Sterling had chosen his heart over his reputation. And Olivia had no idea he was already on his way to find her. The rain had started again by the time Ethan reached Olivia's apartment building. Not a storm. Just a slow, steady rain that left the sidewalks glistening beneath the streetlights. He stood outside for several seconds, staring at the familiar brick building. This was where Olivia had lived all along. A place no larger than the guest house on his estate. A place she had never once complained about. He took a deep breath and walked inside. Olivia opened the door before he could knock. She looked tired. Her eyes were red from crying. "Ethan, I know." She stepped aside silently. He entered the apartment. It felt exactly as he'd imagined. Small, comfortable, books stacked neatly on shelves. A tiny dining table covered with sketches for future event layouts. Fresh flowers in a simple glass vase. Nothing extravagant. Everything felt unmistakably Olivia. Neither of them spoke for several moments. Finally, she broke the silence. "You shouldn't be here." "I disagree." She looked away. "The whole country's talking about us." "I know. Your board needs you. They'll survive an hour without me." "Ethan." He interrupted gently. "Why didn't you tell me?" She laughed quietly. "I wrote you a letter. You wrote me goodbye." His voice remained calm. "I asked why." Olivia folded her arms tightly. "Because I love you." The words escaped before she could stop them. Silence filled the apartment. She closed her eyes. "I wasn't going to say that." Ethan stared at her. "You didn't have to." She slowly looked back at him. "I meant every word." "I know." The tears gathered again. "I couldn't watch your company fall apart because of me." "You think that's what matters?" "It matters to 32,000 families. It matters to your employees. It matters to your grandfather's legacy. It matters to everything you've built." Ethan stepped closer. "It matters." He nodded. "But it isn't everything." Olivia shook her head. "You don't understand." "Nupu." He smiled sadly. "I think I finally do." He reached into his jacket pocket and removed the folded letter she'd written. "I've read this at least 20 times. She looked down. "I hoped you'd hate me." "I tried." She looked up in surprise. "I failed. But despite everything," she laughed through her tears. "You really are terrible at letting people go. I've noticed." The laughter disappeared as quickly as it had come. Olivia walked toward the window. "I watched Vanessa's press conference." "So did I. They have the bank transfer." "I know. They're going to keep digging." "I know." She turned toward him. "Then why are you standing here?" Ethan answered without hesitation. "Because I'd rather lose a merger than lose you." The room became perfectly still. Olivia searched his face. "Do you understand what you're saying?" "I do. Your board might remove you. They might. The company's value could fall." "It could. People will blame me." "They already do." She stared at him. "Then why?" He smiled softly. "Because for the first time in a very long time." He looked around the apartment. "I know what matters." Back at Sterling Holdings, the board meeting had become increasingly heated. The directors sat around the conference table while financial analysts projected market forecasts onto the large screen. One chart showed Sterling Holdings, share price fluctuating throughout the afternoon. Another displayed hundreds of media headlines. The chairman removed his glasses. "We need a public statement tonight." "Yeah." Another director nodded. "The speculation is damaging investor confidence." A third director looked toward Grace. "Where is Ethan?" Grace remained perfectly composed. "He'll return when he's ready." "That's not an answer. It's the only one I have." The chairman sighed. "Grace, we're trying to protect the company." She met his eyes. "So is he." Meanwhile, Eleanor sat quietly in the mansion's library. She wasn't reading. She was waiting. The old grandfather clock ticked steadily beside the fireplace. The front door opened. Grace entered. "Any word?" Grace smiled. He found her. Eleanor closed her eyes briefly. "Good. You don't sound surprised." "I'm not." Grace sat opposite her. "What if she still leaves?" Eleanor looked toward the fire. "When two stubborn people finally tell each other the truth." She smiled knowingly. The difficult part isn't admitting how they feel. It's deciding what to do next. Inside Olivia's apartment, neither of them had moved very far. The conversation seemed too important to interrupt. Olivia finally asked the question that had haunted her all day. "What happens now?" Ethan took a slow breath. "We tell the truth." She looked stunned. "Everything? Everything? The payment? The arrangement? The fake engagement?" He nodded. "All of it." Olivia's shoulders slumped. "It'll destroy you." "It might." "You can't sound so calm about that." "I'm not calm." He laughed quietly. "I'm terrified." She looked at him carefully. "You don't usually admit that." "I've spent too many years pretending not to be." He stepped closer. "I asked you to help me because I thought I needed someone to protect my business." He smiled faintly. "It turns out, I needed someone to remind me I had a life outside of it." Olivia sat on the edge of the sofa. "I keep thinking about your parents." Ethan frowned. "My parents. The scholarship program, the hospital, the community garden. The way everyone who works for you talks about you." She looked into his eyes. "They didn't raise you to protect a lie forever." He slowly nodded. "No, they didn't." She smiled through tears. "I think they'd tell you to tell the truth. I think they would too." Grace's phone rang. She stepped into the hallway outside the boardroom to answer it. "Ethan, I'm with Olivia." Grace smiled. "I assumed. I'm calling because I need you to arrange a press conference." Her smile faded. "For tonight?" "Yes. Invite every major network." Grace understood immediately. "You're going to tell them?" "I am." She remained silent for a moment. "Are you sure?" No. He answered honestly. "But it's the right thing to do." Grace looked back toward the boardroom doors. "I'll make the arrangements." An hour later, Sterling Holdings issued a short statement. Ethan Sterling will address the media at 7:00 p.m. regarding recent speculation DOS. Within minutes, every news outlet interrupted regular programming. Financial analysts began making predictions. Commentators debated what Ethan might say. Vanessa watched the announcement from her office. She smiled confidently. "He's going to deny it." The private investigator nodded. "He almost has to." Vanessa stood and looked out across the city skyline. "If he lies," she smiled, "we release everything else." "And if he tells the truth?" For the first time that evening, Vanessa hesitated. She hadn't seriously considered that possibility. Across the city, Olivia and Ethan stood together by her apartment window, watching news helicopters circle above the downtown skyline. In less than 2 hours, their secret would no longer belong to them. Whatever happened after tonight, their lives would never be the same again. By 6:30 that evening, every major news network had switched to live coverage. Satellite trucks surrounded Sterling Holdings headquarters. Reporters filled the plaza outside. Camera crews adjusted lighting. Producers counted down the minutes. Inside the building, the atmosphere was almost unnaturally quiet. Employees gathered in conference rooms. Receptionists paused their work. Even security guards found television screens wherever they could. Everyone was waiting. Grace met Ethan and Olivia in the underground parking garage. She looked from one to the other. "You came together." Ethan nodded. "We did." Grace smiled faintly. "I was hoping you would." She handed Ethan a folder. "Your communications team prepared 3 possible statements." He accepted the folder, then handed it back. "I won't need them." Grace wasn't surprised. "I didn't think you would." Olivia looked toward the elevators. "It's not too late to change your mind." Ethan smiled gently. "It is." She frowned. "What do you mean?" "The moment I decided honesty mattered more than appearances." He pressed the elevator button. There wasn't another decision left to make. The boardroom was already full when they entered. 12 directors, company attorneys, public relations advisors. The chairman stood immediately. "Ethan, we need to discuss strategy." "I agree." The chairman exhaled in relief. "Good. The communications team recommends acknowledging the payment while avoiding unnecessary details." Another director added, "We can describe it as a confidential consulting agreement." Someone else nodded. "Perfectly legal. No one needs to know more." Ethan remained standing. "No." The room fell silent. The chairman blinked. "No. I'm not giving a partial explanation." "Ethan, I'm giving the complete one." Several directors exchanged worried looks. One finally spoke. "If you admit the engagement began as an arrangement, what?" He hesitated. "The market will react." "It probably will." "The merger could collapse." "It might." Another director stood. "You have a responsibility to this company." Ethan looked around the room. "I know. And that's exactly why I'm telling the truth." Nobody spoke for nearly 10 seconds. The only sound was the air conditioner humming quietly overhead. Finally, the chairman lowered his eyes. "I was afraid you'd say that." Outside the boardroom, Olivia quietly waited beside the windows. She could see hundreds of reporters gathering below. Grace joined her, nervous. Olivia laughed softly. "I've forgotten what it feels like not to be." Grace stood beside her. "You know." She smiled. "I've worked for Ethan for almost 9 years." Olivia listened. "I've seen him negotiate billion-dollar acquisitions. I've watched him address shareholders after difficult quarters. I've watched him remain calm during crises that would have overwhelmed most people." She looked toward the closed boardroom doors. "I've never seen him as nervous as he is tonight." Olivia looked surprised. "He hides it well. He always has." Grace smiled. "Except around you." 2 set precisely 7 o'clock. Ethan walked onto the stage prepared for the press conference. Olivia remained backstage. She wanted to stand beside him. He had insisted otherwise. "This part," he'd told her, "is my responsibility." The room erupted with camera flashes. Dozens of reporters immediately began shouting questions. "Ethan, is the engagement fake? Did you pay Olivia Bennett? Did you mislead investors?" The moderator stepped forward. "Please. Mr. Sterling will make a statement first." The room gradually fell quiet. Ethan adjusted the microphone. He looked across the sea of cameras, then began. "Good evening. I appreciate everyone being here." He paused. "I've spent most of my professional life believing that careful planning could solve almost every problem." A few reporters lowered their pens. This wasn't the statement they expected. 2 weeks ago. He continued. "I made a decision that I believed would protect my company." He took a slow breath. "It was the wrong decision." The room became perfectly silent. "I asked Olivia Bennett to pretend to be my fiancée during a charity gala." Gasps spread throughout the audience. Every camera focused entirely on him. My relationship had unexpectedly ended only hours before the event. I believed canceling the appearance would create uncertainty surrounding an important merger. So, he nodded once. I asked for help. Another murmur swept through the room. I compensated Olivia for that evening. The payment was legal. It was documented, but it created a situation neither of us anticipated. He looked down briefly, then back toward the cameras. What began as one evening, he smiled sadly, became something much more complicated. E2 backstage, Olivia closed her eyes. She could hear every word, every confession, every admission. She had asked him not to sacrifice everything he was. Reporter stood. So the engagement was fraudulent. Ethan answered immediately. No. The beginning was. He spoke carefully. But somewhere along the way, he smiled despite himself. It stopped being pretend. Another reporter called out, "Are you saying you're now genuinely in love with Olivia Bennett?" The room held its breath. Ethan didn't hesitate. "Yes, I am." Backstage, Olivia covered her mouth. Tears filled her eyes. She hadn't expected him to say it publicly. Not like this. Not in front of the entire country. Another reporter raised her hand. "Does Olivia feel the same way?" Ethan smiled softly. "That's a question only Olivia should answer." Inside the boardroom upstairs, every director watched the broadcast in stunned silence. One executive whispered, "He actually did it." The chairman slowly removed his glasses. "I've never seen him look so certain." Questions continued for nearly 20 minutes. Some were fair. Others were harsh. "Do you regret deceiving investors?" "Less." "Will you resign if the board requests it? If they believe that's best for the company?" He nodded. "I'll accept their decision." Did Olivia know what would happen? No. The responsibility was mine. Every difficult question, every uncomfortable accusation. He answered himself. He never blamed Olivia. Not once. Finally, the moderator announced one last question. A young reporter stood near the back. "If you could go back," she asked quietly, "would you still ask Olivia to help you?" The room became silent once more. Ethan thought for several seconds, then smiled. "No?" Several reporters looked surprised. "I would have canceled the announcement. I would have accepted the consequences." He looked directly into one of the television cameras. But his expression softened. "I would have asked Olivia to have dinner with me. A genuine dinner. As myself. Without contracts. Without pretending. And without asking her to become someone she wasn't." The room remained silent. Not because reporters had run out of questions, because none seemed necessary anymore. Backstage, Olivia quietly wiped away a tear. Grace handed her a tissue. "I think." Grace smiled warmly. He finally stopped performing. Olivia nodded. "So did I." Within minutes the press conference ended. News anchors immediately began analyzing every sentence. Some criticized Ethan's decision. Others praised his honesty. Legal experts discussed corporate ethics. Business analysts debated the merger. Across social media, however, a different conversation had begun. People weren't talking about the fake engagement anymore. They were talking about the confession. About the way Ethan had accepted responsibility. About the way he'd refused to let Olivia carry the blame. As Ethan stepped backstage, he found Olivia waiting for him. Neither spoke. Neither needed to. She walked toward him slowly. "You told the whole world." "I did." "You could lose everything." He smiled gently. "I already decided what I wasn't willing to lose." She looked into his eyes. "This still doesn't fix everything." "I know. The board might remove you. They might. The merger could fail. It could." She laughed quietly through fresh tears. "You really are impossible. I've heard that before." She shook her head with a smile. "No. This time." She reached for his hand. "I mean it as a compliment. For the first time since this impossible story had begun, there were no lies left between them, only consequences, and the freedom that came from finally telling the truth. The headlines the next morning were nothing like the ones Olivia had grown used to. She sat beside Ethan in the quiet breakfast room, scrolling through article after article. Some were critical. Some praised his honesty. Others simply reported the facts. Susan ETN sterile and GADMIT civic DBX bagian AKS bus necessarum gemem tipus CETS AC CPTS folel raspuduf to be runagi egimact eonel pusasco frerenciac samach clav marcasa or asastero afistalmoco. Olivia placed her phone face down. I don't know whether to feel relieved or terrified. Ethan looked up from his coffee. I've been alternating between both. Grace entered carrying her tablet. Morning update. Neither of them looked particularly enthusiastic. Let's hear it. The share price opened lower. Ethan nodded. I expected that. But Grace smiled. It's recovering. Olivia frowned. Recovering. The market doesn't seem to be reacting as badly as analysts predicted. Grace scrolled through several reports. A lot of investors are describing yesterday's press conference refreshing. Ethan looked genuinely surprised. Refreshing. Grace shrugged. Apparently admitting a mistake is unusual. Eleanor smiled from across the table. It shouldn't be. Fee. By mid-morning, Sterling Holdings' board gathered once again. The atmosphere was noticeably calmer than the previous day. The chairman stood as Ethan entered. You've given us quite an eventful week. I have. We spent most of the night speaking with shareholders. Ethan waited. They're disappointed. I understand. They're also. The chairman smiled faintly, unexpectedly supportive. Several directors nodded. One older board member leaned forward. You damaged confidence. He paused. But your honesty restored more than we anticipated. Another director added. Several institutional investors specifically requested that you remain as CEO. Ethan blinked. I wasn't expecting that. Neither were we. The chairman folded his hands. The board has reached a decision. The room became silent. You'll remain chief executive officer. Relief spread across several faces. The merger? Ethan asked. Still moving forward. A small smile appeared on Ethan's face. Thank you. The chairman shook his head. Don't thank us. He smiled knowingly. Thank the fact that you finally stopped trying to be perfect. While Sasu outside the boardroom, Olivia waited with Grace. She stood near the same windows where she had spent so many anxious mornings. Grace looked toward the elevator. You know. She smiled. I've missed seeing you here. Olivia laughed softly. I technically don't work here. You never really did. They both smiled. So, Grace continued. What happens now? Olivia looked toward the city skyline. I honestly don't know. For the first time in weeks. She laughed. There isn't a script. Ethan found her a few minutes later. It's official. She searched his face. You still have your job. I do. Without thinking, she hugged him. The embrace lasted only a few seconds. Long enough for both of them to realize how natural it felt. When they stepped apart, Ethan smiled. I've been hoping you'd do that. She laughed. Don't get used to it. I'm going to try. That afternoon they returned to the Sterling estate. For the first time in days, there were no television crews outside the gates. No photographers hiding behind parked cars. No reporters shouting questions. Only quiet. The house itself seemed to breathe again. The chef greeted them with fresh bread cooling on the kitchen counter. The gardeners waved from outside. Even the staff looked noticeably more relaxed. Eleanor looked around the room dramatically. I'd almost forgotten what peace sounds like. Grace smiled. So had I. After lunch, Olivia walked through the gardens alone. The roses were beginning to bloom. The greenhouse windows reflected the afternoon sun. She stopped beside the bench where she and Ethan had shared tea only a few days earlier. It felt strange. Everything had changed. Yet somehow, Everything important remained. She heard footsteps. Ethan, I thought I'd find you here. I seem to spend a lot of time thinking in this garden. It's a good place for it. He sat beside her. For a few moments they simply watched butterflies drifting between the flowers. Finally Ethan spoke. I owe you another apology. Olivia smiled. You're collecting quite a few. I deserve every one. He looked toward the lake. I turned your life upside down. You did. I asked you to pretend to be someone else. You did. I made you carry a secret that should have been mine. She nodded gently. You did. He finally looked at her. I'm sorry. Not the practiced apology of a businessman. Not the carefully measured response of a public figure. Just a man asking forgiveness. Olivia reached over and took his hand. I forgave you a long time ago. You shouldn't have. I know. She smiled. But I did. The breeze carried the scent of jasmine through the garden. Ethan looked at their hands resting together. I don't want to go back. Back. To pretending. She nodded. Neither do I. He took a slow breath. I don't want another arrangement. No contracts. No expectations. No pretending to be engaged. Olivia smiled softly. What do you want? He looked directly into her eyes. I'd like to start over. She waited. A's two people. Who met under completely ridiculous circumstances. And who get to know each other honestly. She laughed. You mean? He smiled. I'd like to ask you on a real first date. She couldn't help smiling. I think we're a little past a first date. Probably. But we've never actually had one. She considered it. He was right. Their dinners had been business. Their conversations had been hidden beneath a lie. Their happiest moments had arrived by accident. They had never chosen each other freely. Until now. So, Ethan asked quietly, would you have dinner with me? Olivia pretended to think. I don't know. He laughed. That bad. I've heard you overcook pasta. I had one difficult evening. You apologized to the spaghetti. It was a stressful situation. She laughed until tears formed in her eyes. Finally, she nodded. Yes, I'd love to. That evening, neither of them dressed formally. No stylists, no designer wardrobes, no photographers. Ethan wore a simple button-down shirt. Olivia wore a light blue summer dress she'd bought years earlier. They drove into town together. Not in a limousine, not with security. Just Ethan driving his own car. They returned to the small Italian restaurant Eleanor had quietly recommended. The owner greeted Ethan warmly. It's been years. It has. The owner looked toward Olivia. Table for two. Ethan smiled. Yes, this time. He glanced at Olivia. It's an actual date. The owner grinned. About time. One dinner was wonderfully ordinary. They talked about childhood memories, favorite books, terrible jobs they'd had before finding success. Olivia admitted she had once accidentally sent a wedding cake to the wrong reception hall. Ethan confessed that, during his first year as CEO, he had accidentally fallen asleep during a video conference after working for 36 straight hours. You did not. I absolutely did. What happened? I woke up because someone politely asked whether I'd finished thinking. Olivia laughed so hard other diners looked over. I wish I'd seen that. I don't. They lingered over dessert long after their plates were empty. Neither wanted the evening to end. When they finally stepped outside, the streets were quiet. They walked slowly toward the car. No cameras. Olivia observed. No reporters. No pretending. Ethan nodded. It feels nice. It feels. She searched for the right word. Real. Back at Lang Global, Vanessa watched the evening news. Instead of discussing scandal, the commentators were talking about Ethan's integrity. Several business analysts praised the way he had accepted responsibility. One financial columnist even described the press conference as masterclass in accountability. Vanessa switched the television off, hard. The private investigator looked uncomfortable. I'm sorry. She stood by the window in silence. Finally she spoke. They're forgiving him. It appears that way. She smiled bitterly. No. They're admiring him. For the first time since beginning her investigation, Vanessa realized she had lost. Not because she failed to uncover the truth, but because the truth had ultimately made Ethan stronger instead of weaker. She quietly closed the investigation file. Leave it. The investigator looked surprised. That's all? She looked once more toward the city lights. This battle is over. 1-2 as the moon rose above the Sterling estate. Olivia and Ethan sat together on the terrace with two familiar mugs of tea resting on the table between them. The silence felt different now. Not uncertain, not complicated, peaceful. Ethan smiled. You know what? I never thanked you. For what? For saying yes that first night. Olivia looked out across the lake. I almost said no. I'm very glad you didn't. She smiled. So am I. For the first time since a frightened event planner had walked into the wrong hotel suite. Neither of them had to pretend anymore. Their story had finally become entirely their own. 3 months passed more quickly than either Olivia or Ethan expected. Life settled into a rhythm neither of them had imagined when their story began. There were no more fake interviews, no carefully rehearsed answers, no pretending. Instead, there were ordinary mornings, shared breakfasts whenever their schedules allowed, weekend walks through town, late-night phone calls that lasted far longer than either intended, and one standing tradition neither of them ever abandoned. Tea on the terrace whenever they were both home. Olivia's event planning company had changed dramatically. Not because Ethan had bought it, he hadn't. In fact, he refused every opportunity to interfere. Instead, something much simpler happened. People remembered her. Several guests from the charity gala hired her to organize corporate events. The hospital foundation asked her to oversee its annual fundraiser. A university invited her to coordinate its scholarship banquet. Every contract had been earned honestly. Every recommendation came from satisfied clients. One afternoon, Olivia stood inside her office reviewing next month's calendar. Every date was filled. Her assistant, Mia, looked over her shoulder. I've never seen the schedule this busy. Olivia smiled. Neither have I. You'll have to start saying no. I know. Mia laughed. That's a wonderful problem to have. It really was. Across the city, Sterling Holdings was thriving once again. The merger had been completed successfully. Employee satisfaction had improved. Several newspapers even commented that Ethan appeared noticeably happier than he had in previous years. The chairman stopped by Ethan's office after a quarterly meeting. You've changed. Ethan looked up from his laptop. I hope that's a compliment. It is. The chairman smiled. You listen more. You delegate more. And, he laughed quietly, you occasionally leave before midnight. I'm making progress. You are. The chairman paused at the doorway. I should have told you something months ago. What? We hired you because you were brilliant. He smiled warmly. We kept you because you finally became human. After he left, Ethan sat quietly for several moments. Then he reached into his desk drawer. Inside rested a small velvet box. He looked at it, closed the drawer again. Not yet. 2-2. That weekend, Eleanor invited everyone to the estate for lunch. The atmosphere was wonderfully relaxed. No formal dining room, no business conversations, just sandwiches, fresh lemonade, and laughter beneath the shade of old oak trees overlooking the lake. Olivia helped clear the dishes while Ethan carried empty serving trays back toward the house. Eleanor watched them from the garden bench. Grace sat beside her. You've got that smile again. Eleanor nodded. I do. What does it mean? It means someone's planning something. Grace looked toward Ethan. You think so? I've raised children. I've raised grandchildren. I know the look. That evening, Ethan asked Olivia if she'd like to take a walk. She immediately agreed. The two of them wandered through the estate gardens as the sun slowly disappeared behind the trees. Everything glowed golden beneath the fading light. "You've been unusually quiet today." Olivia looked at him. I was about to say the same thing. He smiled. "I've been thinking." "Dangerous." "So you've told me?" She laughed. "I stand by that opinion." They reached the old greenhouse, the same place they shared difficult conversations, honest confessions, and quiet moments that had slowly changed everything. Ethan stopped walking. "You know." He looked around the greenhouse. "This place witnessed most of our story." "It did. It witnessed us pretending." "And eventually," she smiled softly, "telling the truth." He nodded. "It seems like the right place." "For what?" Instead of answering immediately, Ethan reached into his jacket pocket. He removed the small velvet box. Olivia stopped breathing. He smiled nervously. "I had a speech." She blinked. "You did?" "It was very organized." "Naturally. I practiced it." She laughed softly. "I should have guessed." He opened the box. Inside rested a simple, elegant diamond ring. Not enormous, not extravagant. Beautiful because it was understated. "I've forgotten every word." Olivia's eyes filled with tears. "I don't think that matters." He took a slow breath. "When we met, I thought I needed someone to save a business deal." He smiled. "It turns out, I met the person who reminded me how to live." Olivia quietly covered her mouth. "You've shown me kindness when I didn't deserve it. You challenged me. You laughed at me." She smiled through her tears. "I still laugh at you. I hope you always do." He looked directly into her eyes. "I don't want another performance. I don't want another arrangement. I don't even want another perfect plan." He slowly knelt on one knee. "I just want a future with you." The greenhouse became completely silent. Birdsong drifted faintly through the open windows. The evening breeze gently stirred the flowers around them. Olivia Bennett. His voice trembled for the first time since she'd known him. "Will you marry me?" She laughed through happy tears. "You know," she wiped one eye, "this proposal is much better than the fake engagement. I was hoping." She nodded immediately. "Yes." He blinked. "Yes." "You don't have to ask twice." Your relief flooded his face. He slipped the ring gently onto her finger. It fit perfectly. She threw her arms around him. For several long moments neither spoke. Neither needed to. This time, there were no cameras, no reporters, no investors, no audience. Only two people who had chosen each other freely. A loud clap echoed from outside the greenhouse. Both of them turned in surprise. Eleanor stood at the entrance with Grace beside her. Behind them were several members of the household staff. Every one of them was smiling. Olivia laughed. "You knew." Eleanor looked completely unashamed. "I suspected." Grace smiled. "He asked me to make sure nobody accidentally wandered into the greenhouse." Ethan looked mildly embarrassed. "I may have planned that part." Olivia grinned. "So you didn't forget everything?" "No." He laughed. "Only the speech." The staff applauded as Eleanor hugged Olivia tightly. "I've been waiting a long time for this." Olivia smiled warmly. "So have we." The two later that night, the four of them sat together on the terrace overlooking the lake. The familiar tea mugs rested on the table once again. Eleanor admired the ring. "It's perfect." Olivia looked toward Ethan. "It really is." Grace smiled. "So," she looked at Ethan, "any plans for the wedding?" He immediately shook his head. "No." Olivia laughed. "You spent weeks planning this proposal." "I did." "I'm taking a short break before planning anything else." Everyone laughed. The sound echoed gently across the quiet lake. As the stars slowly appeared overhead, Olivia rested her head against Ethan's shoulder. "What are you thinking?" He smiled. "I'm thinking. It's amazing how one terrible decision led me to the best thing that's ever happened to me." She looked up at him. I was thinking something similar. What? I'm very glad your assistant mistook me for someone else. He laughed. So am I. Neither of them noticed Eleanor smiling quietly into her tea. Sometimes, life had a remarkable way of turning impossible mistakes into extraordinary beginnings. And for Ethan and Olivia, the best chapter of their lives had only just begun. Wedding planning, Olivia quickly discovered, was far more difficult when the bride happened to own an event planning company. Everyone had an opinion. Florists recommended roses. Designers suggested grand ballrooms. Luxury hotels competed to host the ceremony. Grace arrived one morning carrying 3 thick binders. I've narrowed it down. Olivia looked at the stack. You call that narrowed down? There were originally 12. Olivia laughed. I suddenly understand why brides become overwhelmed. Grace smiled. You've spent years planning everyone else's perfect day. It's strange planning my own. You deserve to enjoy this one. Olivia looked around her office. I keep trying to work. And I keep getting distracted by cake tastings. Grace nodded thoughtfully. A much better problem than unpaid invoices. It certainly was. 2 across town, Ethan faced an entirely different challenge. His executive team had somehow convinced themselves that the wedding should become a national event. One marketing executive stood confidently beside a presentation screen. This is an incredible opportunity for the Sterling brand. Ethan looked up from his notebook. The Sterling brand? Wes. What could live stream the ceremony? No. Invite business leaders from around the world. No. Partner with? No. The room became quiet. The executive looked confused. But think about the publicity. I have. Ethan smiled politely. And that's exactly why the answer is no. The chairman, sitting near the end of the table, hid a smile. After the meeting ended, he caught up with Ethan in the hallway. You've changed. I've heard that before. The chairman nodded. The old Ethan would have accepted the publicity. The new Ethan understands that not everything valuable belongs in a boardroom. Ethan smiled. I learned from the right teacher. That afternoon, Olivia met Ethan at the small park where they had shared one of their first quiet afternoons together. Children laughed near the duck pond. Dogs chased tennis balls. The bookstore owner waved from across the street. Everything felt familiar. Ethan sat beside her on the same wooden bench. I've been told I'm difficult. Olivia raised an eyebrow. Only today? My executive team wants to invite 500 people. And I'd rather invite 50. She smiled. I was hoping you'd say that. He looked relieved. You agree. I don't want a performance. She reached for his hand. We've already had one fake relationship. I'd like our wedding to be real. He squeezed her hand gently. So would I. Over the following weeks, plans slowly came together. The guest list remained intentionally small. Close family, a handful of lifelong friends, the staff from the Sterling estate, Grace, the chairman, several scholarship students whose lives had been changed through the foundation. Even Daniel received an invitation. When Olivia called him, he laughed. I was wondering if I'd make the list. You helped design the children's hospital. You've been a good friend. Daniel smiled warmly. I wouldn't miss it. A week before the ceremony, Olivia visited the greenhouse alone. The flowers were in full bloom. Sunlight poured through the glass roof. She ran her fingers gently across one of the white roses. So this is where you're hiding. Eleanor stepped inside carrying 2 cups of tea. I had a feeling you'd find me. I always do. They sat together on the familiar bench. Eleanor looked around the greenhouse. This room has seen quite a journey. Olivia nodded. It really has. After a quiet moment, Eleanor asked, any wedding nerves? A few. Olivia laughed. Maybe more than a few. Eleanor smiled knowingly. Good. Olivia looked surprised. Good. It means you understand the importance of what I'm about to promise. She gently patted Olivia's hand. A wedding lasts one day. A marriage is built afterward. Olivia smiled. I'll remember that. Though the morning of the wedding arrived beneath clear blue skies. Soft sunlight stretched across the lake behind the Sterling estate. The ceremony had been arranged in the gardens overlooking the water. White flowers lined the stone pathway. Simple wooden chairs faced a flower-covered arch. There were no television cameras, no media helicopters, no photographers shouting directions. Only family, friends, and the quiet excitement shared by people who genuinely cared. Grace adjusted Ethan's tie one final time. You've checked your watch 6 times. I've only checked it 4. 6. He smiled sheepishly. I'm nervous. You should be. She straightened his jacket. It's the biggest promise you'll ever make. But across the gardens, Olivia stood with Eleanor. Her dress was elegant without being extravagant. Simple lace. Flowing fabric. No dramatic jewelry beyond the engagement ring Ethan had placed on her finger in the greenhouse. Eleanor looked at her with tears already forming. You look beautiful. Olivia smiled. I feel lucky. You are. Billionaire nodded toward the garden. So is he. The music began softly. Guests rose to their feet. Olivia took a slow breath, then started walking. Ethan watched her approach. Everything else disappeared. The flowers, the guests, the music. He saw only her. She smiled. The same warm smile she had worn the first night they met. Only now. There was no uncertainty behind it. When she reached him, neither spoke immediately. The officiant smiled knowingly. I think we've kept everyone waiting long enough. Laughter rippled gently through the guests. The ceremony was simple, honest. The officiant spoke about trust, about second chances, about choosing one another every day. Then came the vows. Ethan spoke first. I once believed success meant never making mistakes. He smiled gently. You taught me that success is admitting them. A few guests quietly wiped away tears. You gave me courage. You reminded me to laugh. You reminded me that home isn't a place. It's a person. He looked into her eyes. I promise that every decision I make from this day forward will begin with kindness. Olivia smiled through happy tears. When her turn came, she took both of his hands. I spent years believing I had to solve every problem by myself. She laughed softly. Then I accidentally walked into the wrong hotel suite. The guests laughed warmly. I thought I was helping you. She smiled. It turns out, you were quietly helping me too. You believed in me before I believed in myself. I promise to stand beside you always. Not because you need rescuing, Silent, but because life is better when we face it together. The officiant looked between them. Do you? I do. And do you? I do. You may kiss. This kiss was nothing like the first one beneath the rain. There were no photographers waiting for a headline, no reason to convince anyone. Only joy, only certainty, only love. The applause that followed felt different from the applause at the charity gala months earlier. That applause had celebrated an illusion. This one celebrated the truth. The reception continued late into the evening. Children played on the lawn. A jazz band performed beneath strings of warm lights. The chef proudly served Eleanor's favorite blueberry dessert. Daniel raised a toast. To unexpected beginnings. A Grace added another. To honest endings. Tilaner stood last. She looked toward the newly married couple. My husband used to say that gardens reward patience. She smiled. So does life. She raised her glass. To Ethan and Olivia, may you never stop choosing each other. Everyone echoed the toast. As twilight settled over the estate, Ethan and Olivia slipped away from the celebration for a few quiet minutes on the terrace overlooking the lake. They stood side by side in comfortable silence. Finally, Ethan smiled. So, what now? Olivia rested her head against his shoulder. No, She looked out across the water where their impossible journey had truly begun. We build the life we almost missed. And for the first time since a simple misunderstanding had brought two strangers together, there was nothing left to pretend. Only a lifetime waiting to be lived. Marriage did not slow Ethan and Olivia down. If anything, it gave both of them permission to build the lives they had postponed for far too long. The Monday after their honeymoon, Olivia unlocked the door to her office before sunrise. She stood quietly in the reception area, looking around at the changes. The office that had once consisted of 2 desks and a borrowed printer had grown into an entire floor. Design boards covered one wall. 3 event coordinators were already preparing for the week's meetings. Her assistant Mia walked in carrying coffee. "I was wondering if I'd beat you here." Olivia smiled. "You know me too well." "I do." Mia looked around proudly. "Do you remember when we celebrated getting 1 client a month?" Olivia laughed. "I remember celebrating paying the electricity bill." "That too." They stood together for a moment, taking in the quiet office before the workday began. "It still doesn't feel real." Mia smiled. "It is, and every bit of it is yours." Olivia looked around once more. For the first time in years, she believed it. 2 across the city, Ethan was making changes of his own. The merger had been completed successfully. Profits remained strong. But Ethan had become interested in a different kind of success. During a quarterly leadership meeting, he stood before senior executives without the usual presentation slides. "I've been thinking." Several people exchanged amused smiles. The chairman leaned back comfortably. "That usually means we're about to hear something interesting." Ethan nodded. "I hope so." He looked around the room. "We've spent years measuring performance, revenue, growth, market share. They matter." He paused. "But they're not enough." The room grew quiet. "I want Sterling Holdings to become the best company to work for." One executive frowned thoughtfully. "How?" "Better family leave, expanded education programs, mental health support, leadership training." He smiled. "And fewer meetings that should have been emails." Laughter spread around the room. The chairman nodded approvingly. "I like that last one already." The proposal passed unanimously. As the executives left, one younger manager stopped beside Ethan. "My daughter starts college this fall." Ethan smiled. "Congratulations. The scholarship program helped make it possible." The manager hesitated. "I've wanted to thank you for years." Ethan shook his hand. "You already did, by working hard." One Saturday morning, Olivia and Ethan drove to the community garden. The same one where they had planted maple trees together months earlier. The young trees had grown noticeably taller. Leaves rustled gently in the summer breeze. The elderly volunteer recognized them immediately. "Well," she smiled. "I was wondering when you'd come back." Olivia laughed. "We promised." "You did." The woman looked at the trees. "They're doing well. So are you too." Ethan glanced toward Olivia. "I think she's right." For several hours they helped prepare new planting beds for another group of scholarship students. No photographers had been invited. No speeches were scheduled. Just volunteers working together. At lunchtime, one of the teenagers approached Olivia. "Excuse me." She smiled warmly. "Yes, I saw your interview months ago." Olivia looked surprised. "The press conference." The teenager nodded. "My parents always told me that telling the truth is harder than telling a lie." She smiled. "You proved them right." Olivia felt unexpectedly emotional. "Thank you." The teenager shrugged. "I just thought you should know." After she walked away, Ethan quietly spoke. "You've inspired people." Olivia smiled. "I think we both have." Later that week, Grace invited them to lunch. Not at Sterling Holdings. Not at the estate. At a small cafe tucked away on a quiet side street. Grace looked around dramatically. No reporters. No board members. No emergencies. I wanted one completely normal lunch. Olivia laughed. You planned this very carefully. I learned from Ethan. Ethan smiled. I wasn't aware I deserved credit. You don't. Grace grinned. You deserve blame. The three of them laughed together. As lunch arrived, Grace became unusually thoughtful. You know, she looked at Olivia. The first day you walked into Sterling Holdings EU, I assumed you'd disappear after a week. Olivia nodded. So did I. Grace smiled warmly. I'm very glad we were both wrong. That evening, Ethan and Olivia returned to the estate. The gardens were glowing beneath the setting sun. They wandered slowly toward the greenhouse. It had become something of a tradition. Every important conversation seemed to begin or end there. Olivia stopped beside the bench where Ethan had proposed. I've been thinking. He smiled. I should probably be worried. She nudged his shoulder gently. You always say that. Because it's usually true. She laughed. I've been thinking about starting something new. What kind of something? She looked around the greenhouse. When my business almost failed. She paused. I didn't need someone to rescue me. I needed someone to believe I could succeed. Ethan nodded slowly. I understand. I want to create a mentorship program. For people starting small businesses. She smiled. Especially people who don't have connections. Or investors. Or anyone telling them they'll make it. Ethan didn't answer immediately. Instead, he smiled. I think that's the best idea you've ever had. She raised an eyebrow. Better than agreeing to fake an engagement. He laughed. Much safer. Lee too. Over the following months, they worked together to launch the Olivia Bennett Initiative, a program offering mentorship, workshops, and small startup grants to young entrepreneurs. Olivia led the mentoring sessions herself. She remembered exactly how frightening it had been to wonder whether her company would survive another month. One afternoon, she met a young baker, hoping to open her first shop. Another day, she encouraged a mechanic trying to expand into his own garage. Every conversation reminded Olivia of the person she had once been. Hopeful. Scared. After one workshop, Ethan found her stacking empty chairs. Everyone left smiling. She looked around the room. So did I. He picked up the last chair. You know. What? I've watched you speak to hundreds of people. You never sound more confident than when you're helping someone else. She smiled. Maybe because I know exactly how they feel. That weekend, the Sterling estate hosted its annual summer picnic. Employees brought their families. Children raced across the lawns. Music drifted through the gardens. Eleanor watched everything from her favorite bench beneath the old oak tree. Olivia joined her carrying 2 glasses of lemonade. You look happy. Eleanor accepted the drink. I am. She watched Ethan teaching a group of children how to fly a kite. He laughs more now. Olivia smiled. I've noticed. So do the people who work for him. Eleanor looked toward Olivia. You gave him something money never could. Olivia shook her head gently. I don't think I gave it to him. What then? I think. She smiled as Ethan finally managed to launch the kite into the sky. I simply reminded him it was still there. Eleanor quietly nodded. I believe you're right. As evening settled over the estate, guests slowly began heading home. The gardens became peaceful once again. Ethan and Olivia stood together on the terrace overlooking the lake. The same lake that had witnessed uncertainty won. Fear, honesty, forgiveness, and love. It's beautiful tonight, Olivia said softly. Ethan slipped his hand into hers. It always has been. She looked at him. No. She smiled. I think we just finally learned how to slow down long enough to notice. He kissed her forehead gently. For a while neither spoke. They simply watched the sunset reflecting across the water. The future no longer felt uncertain. It felt full of possibilities. And together, they were finally building it on something far stronger than appearances. They were building it on truth. 5 years later. Some stories begin with love. Others begin with heartbreak. Theirs had begun with a mistake. A mistaken identity. A desperate request. A promise that was supposed to last one evening. Sometimes Olivia still laughed when she thought about it. If I'd corrected that assistant one more time, she said one quiet Sunday morning, none of this would have happened. Ethan smiled over the newspaper. I've thought about that too. And I've decided he's getting a very generous holiday bonus every year. Olivia laughed. I was wondering why he always looked so happy. He unknowingly introduced me to my wife. I owe him. Her too, life at the Sterling estate had changed. Not because it had become grander. Because it had become warmer. The house that once echoed with schedules and meetings now echoed with laughter. Friends visited without formal invitations. Employees no longer hesitated to knock on Ethan's office door. Family dinners happened every Sunday. Eleanor insisted upon it. No excuses. She reminded everyone regularly, especially billionaires. Due to Olivia's company had become one of the city's most respected event planning firms. She no longer accepted every contract. Instead, she chose projects she genuinely believed in. Charity galas, hospital fundraisers, scholarship celebrations, community events. The Bennett initiative had expanded into 3 cities. More than 200 small businesses had received mentorship. Many of those entrepreneurs now returned to mentor others. One afternoon, Olivia stood at the back of a workshop watching a young cafe owner explain how the program had changed her life. Mia quietly stepped beside her. You've created something remarkable. Olivia smiled. I didn't. We did. Sterling Holdings had changed too. Employee turnover had dropped dramatically. The scholarship foundation supported more students than ever before. The company had become known not only for its success, but for the way it treated people. At an annual leadership conference, a young manager approached Ethan. I've wanted to ask you something. Ethan smiled. Go ahead. What's the best business decision you've ever made? Several executives nearby paused to listen. They expected him to mention the merger, or an acquisition, or a major investment. Instead, Ethan smiled. I once admitted I was wrong. The young manager looked confused. That was your best business decision. It wasn't a business decision, Ethan replied. It was a life decision. And it made me a better leader. That evening, Ethan returned home earlier than usual, a habit he had worked hard to keep. He found Olivia in the greenhouse. Of course she was. She was trimming roses while humming softly to herself. I should have guessed. She looked up and smiled. You always find me. I've had years of practice. He handed her a small paper bag. What's this? Open it. Inside was the same worn mystery oil they had bought together during their first real day off. Only now, it was a new edition. Inside the front cover he'd written a message. Read to Olivia. Thank you for walking into the wrong room. Love always. Ethan. She looked up with tears in her eyes. You remembered. I remember everything. She hugged him tightly. You've become sentimental. I blame you. I'll accept responsibility. Loot. Later that week, Daniel visited the estate for dinner. He had recently become engaged himself. As everyone sat around the table, Daniel raised his glass. I've been thinking. Ethan laughed. That's usually dangerous. It is. Daniel smiled. I spent years telling people the funniest story I'd ever witnessed was Olivia accidentally agreeing to pretend to marry a billionaire. Everyone laughed. But he looked toward Ethan and Olivia. I've realized that isn't the remarkable part. What is? Olivia asked. Daniel smiled warmly. The remarkable part, too, is that once you stop pretending, you never had to again. The table fell quiet. Even Eleanor smiled proudly. I couldn't have said it better. See to as the evening came to an end, the family gathered on the terrace overlooking the lake. Some traditions were simply too important to abandon. Grace poured tea. Eleanor settled into her favorite chair. The familiar mugs were arranged on the table, exactly as they had been so many evenings before. The lake reflected the stars. A gentle breeze rustled the trees. Ethan looked toward Olivia. "Do you ever miss it?" She frowned. "Miss what?" "The excitement. The headlines. The chaos." She laughed. "Absolutely not." He smiled. "Good." She rested her head against his shoulder. "I like this version much better." "So do I." After a comfortable silence, Eleanor spoke. "You know." Everyone looked toward her. "My husband used to believe that every great garden tells a story." She looked around the terrace. "The flowers people admire aren't the beginning. The roots are. The patient care. The difficult seasons. The quiet work no one else sees." She smiled at Ethan and Olivia. "Love works the same way." No one spoke. There was nothing to add. The silence itself felt complete. Much later that night, after everyone had gone inside, Ethan and Olivia remained on the terrace. The same place where they had shared tea during uncertain evenings. The same place where they had wondered what would happen when the arrangement ended. Olivia slipped her hand into his. "Can I ask you something?" "You always can." "If your assistant hadn't mistaken me for someone else." She smiled. "Do you think we ever would have met?" Ethan considered the question carefully. "I honestly don't know." He looked out across the moonlit lake. "But I do know something else." "What?" He turned toward her. "I would have spent the rest of my life not knowing what I was missing." She smiled. "I was thinking exactly the same thing." They stood together in comfortable silence. No pretending. No performance. No cameras. Only two ordinary people whose extraordinary story had begun with a single impossible mistake. Some people spend a lifetime searching for the right person. Others find them when everything goes according to plan. Ethan and Olivia found each other because nothing did. And perhaps that was the greatest reminder of all. Life rarely follows the script we write for it. Sometimes the wrong door, the wrong moment, the wrong decision becomes exactly what leads us to the right future. The fake engagement had lasted only a few days. The love that grew from it would last a lifetime.
That's the end.
Thank you for spending time with Ethan and Olivia's story. If you enjoyed this journey from a fake engagement to a real love story, we'd love to hear your thoughts. What was your favorite moment? And what would you have done if you were in Olivia's place? Don't forget to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and share this story with someone who believes that love sometimes arrives in the most unexpected ways.